How y'all doing? And we are back for a live, the first live in a week. There just hasn't been a lot to talk about when it comes to the Toronto Raptors. There is, however, a lot to talk about when it comes to the general NBA, and the Raptors are 1 inch closer, perhaps 1 day closer to the biggest offseason in franchise history. I don't think that's an overstatement when I say that, largely because there's just so much hinging in the balance. There's so much uncertainty. So first, let's talk about the NBA Finals, and then we'll get into who I think the Toronto Raptors' leading candidates are for the coaching job. I know that Steve Nash is interviewed. I do not think that he's a very serious candidate, but let's talk about some candidates who are serious candidates, and we're also going to talk about the draft. So first off, elephant in the room. No team has ever come back from 0-3. There's a reason for this, and as someone who's dug into the numbers pretty much my whole life and has been a bit of a math nerd, I gotta say, that's funny. Where is the beard? I shaved. Yep. I look different. I look weird. And I'm just going with it. That's what I'm gonna do. All right. So 0-3. This narrative of no team has ever come back from 0-3. The Boston Celtics are washed. Look, elephant in the room, obviously, I picked the Boston Celtics to win the NBA championship this year. I do think that they are by far the more talented team. They are also facing a team that is decimated by injuries, that is already down on talent. Gabe Vincent out, Tyler Hero out. Regardless of how well they've done without Tyler Hero, regardless of all the narratives around playoff Jimmy, I do not think that you are giving the appropriate credit here where credit is due. First of all, the math behind this is somewhat skewed because there's a bit of a sampling bias here. The odds of a team going down 0-3 to a team that is less talented are almost, I would say, almost as astronomically low as a team coming back from 0-3, which is to say it generally never happens. You just don't see a team that is more talented than the other team fall down 0-3. Does this speak to the unpreparedness of the Boston Celtics? Does it speak to the coaching job that Joe Mazzulla has done? Does it speak to the immaturity of the group as a collective? Or does it just speak to the fact that Eric Spoelstra is such a great coach? Jimmy Butler, Kyle Lowry had that team ready to pounce on an opponent that did not take them very seriously. Coming into this series, 97% odds that the Boston Celtics are going to win this. 97%. And suddenly they're down 0-3 and everyone's like, okay, it's a wash. They're going to lay down like the Lakers. The difference in this series and the Lakers series against the Nuggets and perhaps every other series, almost every other series, which has ended after 0-3, is that the Boston Celtics are a better team. They're a more talented team. They're the better shooters. They've got the better star. I don't care what you say about Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler is one of my favorite players, but he's not a better player than Jason Tatum. Yes, even in the playoffs. Speaking to that, I do think that the Boston Celtics have a chance here, which is not usually the case. Now, why is that usually not the case? Well, this comes down to math, really. Y'all remember the Monty Hall problem? In every single situation, emotions get the better of us. I'll give you an example. Let's say I flip a coin, right? Now, you see me flip this coin, and I'm flipping a coin against somebody, and you know that there's a 50-50 chance it's going to be heads or tails. Every single game is going to be heads or tails, right? That's kind of what it's like when two evenly matched opponents match up. You might skew the balance a little bit for the home team. You might skew the balance for the healthier team. But in most cases, when two teams, like usually 4 or 5 matchups, usually in NBA Finals, not always, but usually in NBA Finals, there's usually a 50-50 chance, give or take, just like a coin toss. So let's say, for instance, that I flip the coin and it goes heads 5 times in a row or 3 times in a row. There is a subconscious human bias to pick tails for the next one because it can't possibly be heads 5 times in a row, 6 times in a row, right? It's actually not true. Every time you flip the coin, the probability is the same. The question you should be asking is not, can the Boston Celtics come back from 0-3? It's, Can the Boston Celtics win 4 straight games against the Miami Heat? Now, ask yourself the question. If the Boston Celtics had met the Miami Heat in the opening round, right, despite all of your feelings about playoff Jimmy, would it have shocked you if the Celtics swept them? They were a play-in team. One of the worst shooting, one of the worst scoring teams in the league. Would it have shocked you? Wouldn't have shocked anybody. I don't think anyone would have been calling for Coach Spoelstra to be fired. I don't think anyone would have been calling for Jimmy Butler to be, that he's not real. I think you would have said what most people would have said, which is the Boston Celtics are simply a better team. So the question of can the Boston Celtics beat the Miami Heat 4 straight? Absolutely they can. And I'll tell you right now, if this game goes to a game 7, the Heat are going fishing. So it's really tonight. The Heat have to win this tonight. I got to say it. It's true. They got to win tonight. I'm not counting playoff Jimmy out. I'm not counting the heart of a champion out. Okay? The Boston Celtics have a slew of issues, and I do generally think that the team that's better coached in most series, especially elimination games, does tend to have an advantage. But the question of, well, it's 150-0, no team has ever done it. Records are meant to be broken, man. This narrative has to die. Because I tell you, the narrative becomes reality, right? If you are the team that is down 0-3, your belief system starts to be like, well, no one's ever done it, so we are just toast. But the reality is you just have to win 4 games. And every single game, the odds are once again back to what they should be, which is 50-50. Unless, of course, the Boston Celtics are, which they are, the more talented team. In which case, in every single game, I would say the odds are 85-15 for the Celtics. Now the question becomes, can they win 2 straight? Well, I think we all know that they can win 2 straight. They've proven that they can win in Miami. In Game 4, they did. They fought off elimination. They are now 0-4, I believe, in elimination games in the playoffs. This is just an immature team. There's no other way to put it. It's an immature team with a 34-year-old coach who's doing this for the first time. He did not have them prepared in Game 3. They got smacked. I do not expect the Heat to beat themselves. Now, who am I rooting for? Tough question. It's hard to say I'm rooting for anybody over the Denver Nuggets. Feeling a great sense of pride here. National pride. Not something that I've really usually leaned into since I was a kid. Obviously, you feel some sort of way about Peja Stojakovic, being a top 4 MVP candidate, blowing up the league, becoming the best shooter in the league. Felt a great deal of pride because we come from a small country. Serbia is a very small country. The idea that Serbia could produce the greatest tennis player, in my opinion, of all time in Novak Djokovic, and then come back with this pudgy, second round pick and have the greatest player in the NBA, I got to tell you, if you don't think Nikola Jokic is the best player in the NBA, you don't know what you're looking at. You just don't. You don't. He is too good. He is too good. I don't think either of these teams in the East is going to beat the Denver Nuggets. I just don't. But if there was a team that could beat the Denver Nuggets in this entire playoffs, in my opinion, it is the Boston Celtics. So if the Heat make it to the finals, sorry to say, the story ends in the finals. If the Boston Celtics make it to the finals, I think the Denver Nuggets are about to get exposed defensively because there is a lot of talent, and I don't think the Denver Nuggets have faced a team anywhere near as good as the Boston Celtics. It'll be tough, but it'll be interesting. To those saying that it'll be bad for ratings if the Heat and the Denver Nuggets make it to the finals, I think you're crazy too. This is the basketball gods reversing a trend of super teams and superstars. I mean, granted, Jimmy Butler, Jason Tatum, Nikola Jokic, these are all superstars, something the Raptors do not have. But I think they're rewarding the right things, which is a culture of winning. These are teams that have been consistently great. None of them cracked through under this iteration, Jimmy Butler has never won a championship with the Miami Heat or a championship at all. The Boston Celtics under Jason Tatum have been close several times. Eastern Conference finals, didn't quite make it. But they've built this out over several years, and they've built a culture of accountability, role players accepting their roles, stars holding themselves accountable, and being selfless. When the Boston Celtics were on the verge of getting swept, I desperately considered making a video about the importance of culture and selfless leaders. Jimmy Butler and Nikola Jokic have a lot in common with Scottie Barnes. Granted, they are much better players than Scottie Barnes right now, but the mentality of making the right play, holding your teammates accountable, but not blasting your teammates, giving credit to others, even when you are great, when you are clearly the best player on the team, even when you are the biggest reason for the win, not taking that credit, hogging that credit, but rather giving that credit to others. Look at how glowingly Nikola Jokic talks about Jamal Murray, as he should. Jamal Murray has been excellent. Look at how much he credits his coaching staff, how much he gives credit to others. This is a complete divergence or a flip from how the Raptors were this season, where it was all about who's responsible for what, who's to blame for what. This culture is what Masai Ujiri is desperately trying to get back, in my opinion. Jimmy Butler doesn't force anything. He doesn't care if he takes 8 shots. Nikola Jokic doesn't care if he takes 10 shots. Such a recurring theme throughout the league or throughout the year for the Toronto Raptors this year was, why isn't Scottie Barnes taking more shots? Why isn't he being more assertive? And what did he say? He said, I'm trying to make the right play. I'm trying to make the right play. I think it's coming. I have been very encouraged by what I've seen from Scottie this offseason and towards the tail end of last season. I saw growth and gaps in bits and pieces. And I think the Raptors are a little bit better off, but there's so much uncertainty. I have very big expectations for Christian Koloko. I checked out some of his workout tapes, and he looks like he's getting much stronger. This was a major issue for Christian Koloko, and if you can take the good and bad out of Christian Koloko's season this year, namely it was strength around the basket, inability to finish, experience. These are the things that he needs to get better at. But I think the Raptors have a really good one in him, and I think he's going to be much better next season. Seems like he's working very hard. It's just a really smart player. It's not quite like Precious Achiuwa or Chris Boucher, where it's like, man, when's that mental switch going to go off for Christian Koloko? The mental switch turned on years ago. He's a very smart player. Now it's just about the physical development, skills development, extending that shot range out. I think the Raptors are pretty set at center. So where are they looking in the draft? Well, there was a video very recently of Gary Trent Sr. checking out the Philadelphia 76ers facility. There have long been rumors that James Harden is heading to Houston, and I think that it's a pretty seamless fit, isn't it? If somehow the Philadelphia 76ers can get Gary Trent Jr., I think he kind of works next to Joel Embiid, right? Tyrese Maxey, Joel Embiid, Gary Trent Jr. I think it's a really good fit. I think people are somewhat underrating Gary Trent Jr. I gotta be honest. Like Christian, who's a friend of this channel, and he messaged me earlier today, and he said Malik Beasley or Gary Trent Jr. Who's better? Oh, Gary Trent Jr. by far. He is going to be a big loss if the Raptors, end up falling out of it. There's a comment here from Abu. Thoughts about the Raptors having called Rockets about the 4th pick? Think it depends on who's available at that 4th pick. Let's talk a little bit about the draft and talk about the top of the draft, and then eventually we'll descend into the coaching stuff. And I do want to say the lines are open. This is going to be around a 1-hour live, and towards the end of it, I'll give you an announcement on what's coming from Pensare Basketball. I realize have not been very regular about the videos lately, but we're going to get hella regular around June. We're going to do a prospect a day, and we're going to be doing post-game for every single finals game. Regardless of what happens, regardless of who wins, we'll do post-game for every single finals. So we're going to get back to lives in June. I apologize for taking some time away. I've been very burnt out from all the work that went into the Pendants Film Festival. Also, a lot of editing projects to catch up on and stuff. So I'm just trying to get my life in order, get my hard drive sorted and all that stuff so we can take that jump. But June, July, August, September, October, like it's going to be 5 straight months of just crazy content. So definitely hit subscribe if you haven't already. And let me know in the comments below what you want to see, like which prospects you want to see covered. Because, you know, the Raptors have about 15 to 20-ish realistic targets. And I think we can cover absolutely every single one of them in a deep dive, one per day, starting in June. Okay. Where were we going? We were going with the top of the draft. Victor Wembanyama. Right. Foregone conclusion. He's going number 1. But who's going number 2? A lot of people say he's injury prone, could be injury prone. He has not shown to be injury prone thus far in his career. Big men of his size tend to be a little bit injury prone, yes, but he's taken a lot of precautions and a lot of prep has gone into making sure that he is as healthy as possibly can be. I think the Spurs are the right organization, the type of organization that will bring him along slowly. They will not be running him out for 38 minutes a night. They understand this is a long-term asset and a long-term investment in his development and betterment. And they have usually, apart from the Kawhi Leonard controversy, shown a willingness to bring people along at the right pace. It's tempting, you know, if you're a team like Detroit or a team like Houston or a team like Charlotte, to want to make a big wave in the first year of his career, get him up, 35, 36 minutes a night. This was a constant talking point of Butch Carter when Tracy McGrady was in Toronto, which was his body simply not ready for, 35 minutes a night. And so he brought him along slowly, much to Tracy's discontent. But it was the right move. And it wasn't until he went to Orlando and played under Doc Rivers, the recently fired, thank God, fired Doc Rivers, where he was playing 38, 30, 39, 42 minutes a night, carrying that lowly Magic team that had no chance with Grant Hill out, just trying to, eke out wins and at the expense of what? And I'm not saying that Tracy would have been super healthy at any point. Who knows? Maybe his Rockets career goes differently if he has a coach early on who commits to him as opposed to committing to the record. I think Victor Wembanyama is going to the right place. I think the Spurs will be decent with him. I do. And I think they'll bring him along slowly. Now we go to the second pick. And it is widely rumored that if the draft were to happen today, that the Charlotte Hornets would pick Brandon Miller. Now, if you ended up catching Vince and my live, clearly we both believe that Scoot Henderson is clearly the better player. And I think that will somehow resolve itself. But the Charlotte Hornets are the Charlotte Hornets, and I do not expect them to necessarily do the logical thing or the right thing, especially if they have this thing in their head that LaMelo and Scoot can't play together, which is completely factually stupid and not true. But let's say they do allow Scoot to fall to 3. What should the Raptors give up for 3 if Scoot Henderson is there? Honestly, anything and everything except for Scotty Barnes. I am so high on Scoot Henderson, man. So high. I have always valued players who saw the game better than other people on court. And when I watch Scoot Henderson play, when I see him on the court and there's like 9 other guys on the court, he sees everything before everyone. He sees things before his coaches, and he has the physical tools and the ability and the length and the size and the athleticism and everything to put all of it together. He has a lot of Tyrese Halliburton in his game with probably a much more advanced scoring package at the same age. He is further along at the same age, but he sees the game the same way. Obviously, I'm a very big Tyrese Halliburton fan. Still believe the Kings gave up too soon on him. But I think that when you have a guy like that, he probably goes number 1 in a lot of drafts. If he ends up number 3 in this draft, you move hell or high water to get him. Anything to get him. That includes OG, that includes future picks, but you can't trade future picks. Sorry. Had to rub the salt in the wound of the Jakob Poeltl trade again. That includes OG, that includes Pascal Siakam, includes whatever. It doesn't matter what you're taking back. Doesn't matter if you're taking back Yusuf Nurkic and useless contracts. I don't care. Scoot Henderson, 1 for 1, is worth more than Pascal Siakam to me. And I would absolutely move him. Now, if I would move him, I gotta tell you, there's a lot of teams out there that would probably do the same thing. I don't know if Pascal Siakam is beating some of the offers that other teams can throw, which includes, maybe a disgruntled star and multiple picks. The Raptors do not have the option of adding multiple picks. But if a star is not available, then maybe Pascal Siakam is the best that the Portland Trailblazers can do. And obviously, they're not valuing multiple picks the same way that younger teams might. They're trying to build a competitive roster around Dame Lillard, and Pascal Siakam might be their best bet to do that. For the Raptors, it obviously clears up a lot of issues when it comes to long-term cap space. I think the new CBA, meshed with the parity around the NBA right now, is going to create one of the most interesting off seasons in league history. You have probably 10 teams, maybe 14 teams, that legitimately believe they are one move away from an NBA championship. NBA championships are not easy to come by. Take it from the Denver Nuggets. It's the first time they're making it to the finals in their entire existence. Take it from the Raptors. One NBA championship. Will they win another one in the next 20 years? I hope so, but it is not guaranteed. You are just one Spurs dynasty away from, a decade of Wembenyama championships. You are one star pushing his way to a young enough, competitive enough, competent enough market from another, 10 years of a Kobe, Shaq, Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen type of dynasty, the Warriors dynasty. You do have to take these opportunities when they come. And this is an opportunity if there ever was one. I think most teams around the league probably think that they are one move away from giving Denver a very competitive series, or one move away from giving the Miami Heat a competitive series, if not whooping the Miami Heat. There is no super team. There is no super team, especially in the West. So if you're the Portland Trailblazers, you might believe that Pascal Siakam, Dame Lillard means finals next year. What are you willing to give up? Number 3 is a hypothetical. Number 3 might not work out, especially if the number 3 is Brandon Miller. A lot of questions. For me, a lot of questions. But if it's Scoot Henderson, I think the Raptors should move on it. Beyond that, it's hard to say what's happening and what's not. I can't say the Combine really shifted anyone in the lottery completely out of the lottery. I don't think Jarris Walker or, Cason Wallace measuring like an inch short. I don't think any of these guys really, did anything. I think, if anything, it shored up a few doubts that some people had. Anthony Black, what did his pro day sessions look like? Well, he's hitting shots. That's good. He's hitting shots. That was a big concern people had. Could that elevate him could that maybe embolden some team that really, really isn't a fan of Azar Thompson or Emin Thompson to pick him at 4 or 5? Certainly not out of possibility. Jarris Walker, like the athleticism. Cam Whitmore. There's so many guys where, you could sort of sell yourself on them. Nick Smith Jr., a name that just keeps coming up. Guy who had a really tough season, injuries, but there's still a lot of people that are still ranking him very high. Keontae George, a familiar and, talking point on this channel. Does what happens with Jamal Murray right now and the way Jamal Murray is playing and how much Keontae George really does remind a lot of people of Jamal Murray. He shouldn't, but some people are going to die on that hill. Does that change how people feel? I mean, Jamal Murray is balling out of his mind. Nikola Jokic is clearly the best player on that team, but there is no doubt who is the second best player on that team. And it is a major, major selling point for teams that are looking at what Jamal Murray has been able to do despite his defensive inefficiencies and shortcomings, that there's nobody on the other side who can stop that guy. Nobody on the Lakers could stop him. Nobody on the Suns, nobody has been able to stop that guy. Playoff Jamal is real, right? So what does that do for a guy like Keontae George? Does that catapult him to top 10 status? Because some team, that's been watching the finals is like, that guy looks like Jamal Murray. It happens every year. The NBA finals have such a trickle-down effect on the NBA draft because teams start to get ideas of what is winning in the NBA. What do you have to win in the NBA? Switchable bigs. Okay. Shot blocking, okay. A dominant wing scorer, okay. That seems to be the trend. So I think the Raptors, if they stand put at 13, man, if they can get 3 and 13, my God, the entire trajectory of this team just goes through the roof for me. Everything just changes because not only is Scoot talented enough, not only does he have the forward vision and the playmaking and the IQ and all that stuff to really, here, Spooky Ghostwriter saying here, one sec. Rob, if Toronto was to keep 13 and get Scoot at 3, what position would you want to get? I would never think about positions. I would never think about positions at 13. I wouldn't care, to be honest. I would always take the best player available at 3. I would take the best player available at 13. I understand that sometimes you create a logjam for yourself in which there's no direct pathway for that prospect to get minutes. Well, then you trade somebody. You do not. Like, if it's damn close, if it's like identical, like it's like this prospect and this prospect are both evenly ranked, okay, then maybe you look for situational, team fit, positional versatility fit, whatever. Scoot's a 1-2, right? I think he's an ideal backcourt mate for Scotty Barnes. Granted, his shooting is going to have to come a little bit further along, but I really like him. But I also like a lot of guys at 13 that are guards. And I think 13 is a really great place for guards and wings. Man, it's really great. I don't think the Raptors need a big. Not that there are that many bigs highly touted in this draft apart from Wemby. But I would really, really like to see them take the best player available at both positions if they were to trade up for 3, you know? I mean, hey, I trust the Raptors scouting department. If they really believe that Brandon Miller is worth it, certainly not, I don't have any objections to it. I think some of his interview stuff has bugged me more than anything else. It's how he answers questions. It's some of the stuff about the controversy and it's just, I could be wrong. He could clearly be the second best player in this draft, but I highly doubt it. Yeah, but I like a lot of guys at 13, man. I do. There's so many players. Like, this draft is so incredibly deep. From all the way to 6 to 15, there's probably like 2 or 3 all-stars somewhere, and I trust the Raptors to find them. Now, moving on to the coaching search, because this is we're getting a little bit closer, but what's the hang-up? What's the delay? Well, when the Raptors fired Nick Nurse, I believe they were by far the best coaching situation. Regardless of what Ime Udoka says about how great the situation is in Houston, I really did believe that the Raptors had the best situation for any coach. It's an organization that has stability, a track record of winning, a competent front office, right? A really good young player in Scotty Barnes. And, I think there's a lot of intriguing young prospects. I think especially for a coach that likes to be creative on defense. And I think we're seeing a lot of creativity on defense from the Miami Heat as well as the Boston Celtics. I think it's really a fascinating roster. If I was a coach, I would want to coach the Toronto Raptors. But suddenly, you got a lot of coaching vacancies around the league. You got 2 MVPs who don't have a coach, in Giannis and Joel Embiid. And I think this is a bit of a catch-22 situation because not only do you introduce jobs into the market, you also introduce coaching candidates into the market. Now, I don't think Doc Rivers is nearly as highly regarded after what happened, and I'm not sure that Coach Budenholzer is as nearly as highly regarded after what happened. I do think Monty Williams is, which opens up the fact that the Phoenix Suns also have a coaching opening. So if you are a coach like a Budenholzer or a Monty Williams, or even one of these emerging candidates like a David Adelman or Jody Fernandez, you might look at a situation like, hey man, I have a chance to coach Kevin Durant and Devin Booker as a first-year head coach. And if they vibe with me, if they like me, and KD is a very open dude, he is a very smart guy. And if you understand basketball and he respects your basketball acumen, and he will size it up very quickly, but if he trusts what you're saying and he believes in your philosophy, he will not do to you what Kyrie Irving did to you. and he will trust you, and he will get support for you. I wonder if Joel Embiid is that way. I know Giannis is that way. So I think that every one of these coaching candidates, these coaching openings, poses a bit of a competitive disadvantage for the Toronto Raptors, who are no longer the best situation in town. A lot of uncertainty. Resolve the roster, I think you make yourself a little bit more appealing. But at the end of the day, there are 30 jobs, and there are probably 90 people who could hold those 30 jobs. So it is a constant game of musical chairs, and whoever doesn't get one of those head coaching jobs is going to probably take a lead assistant job with some other guy, or whatever. I think Ime Udoka is going to get some of the Boston bench. That means that one of these guys who doesn't get a head coaching job is going to be able to be the lead assistant for Joe Mazzulla in Boston, and they will certainly shell out the big bucks to get that to happen. But for a coach like Sam Cassell, for someone like Sergio Scariolo, for someone like Jordi Fernandez or David Adelman, I think the Raptors are a good fit. And I think that the Toronto Raptors present a very interesting possibility, if not a very sure one. Who are my favorites? I got to tell you, when this entire process started, one of my favorite coaches was Jordi Fernandez. Made a video about Jordi Fernandez and Becky Hammon. Since cooled a little bit on Becky Hammon. I remain somewhat certain that if it were up to me to hire a head coach, I believe I would go with Jordi Fernandez. If not him, I would go with David Adelman. If not them, I would look at Monty Williams, perhaps Mike Budenholzer. Not a huge fan of Mike Budenholzer. Not a fan of Doc Rivers. So, I think it should come down to those three. And I don't know if Monty Williams is interested. I do not think that names like Frank Vogel and Steve Nash should really enter the equation too seriously, though. And I don't think that JJ Redick should either. But the sooner the Raptors can resolve this, I think the more cohesion there will be. They have a lot of decisions ahead. Reportedly, Masai Ujiri is very upset that Fred VanVleet has decided to dangle his future onward and sort of not give them a commitment. Fred VanVleet recently posted an update with his agent, and they're meeting up at the Clutch headquarters or whatever. This guy is always going to be going to the top dollar. You're not going to get him for anything less than probably 10% more than the other competitive offer, because he's kind of sick of being here too, in a sense, right? I mean, I'm not reporting that, but just from the tea leaves on the wall, based on every single thing that we've heard from the people around him, from his own, frustrations with this and that, the taxes. There's so many factors here. Going to Orlando, away from the scrutiny of this fan base. Also, I mean, let's be honest here. Fred VanVleet has had a very contentious relationship with this fan base. A friend of mine, Joseph Palumbo, just said that he was in Taiwan, and in Taiwan, apparently he talked to somebody and they said, keep Scotty, trade Fred. Shit, this thing's global now. That's funny. Someone saying, King Kylie saying, there's numerous reports saying Masai and Bobby still evaluating, unsure of direction, keeping the same core trading. Is this just a smokescreen? Who benefits from that smokescreen? James saying, Brian Windhorst said Masai and Bobby seem very confused and unsure what to do. I think Fred is the first domino, and typically when you see a front office that is a little unsure on what to do, it usually is because they're being held kind of by the balls, maybe at gunpoint. They're being held up by someone else not making a decision. You will notice that the Toronto Raptors kind of got caught with their pants down when Kawhi Leonard went to LA. How did they respond? Well, they signed Stanley Johnson, and, Kawhi took his sweet ass time making his decision, and had he made it sooner, perhaps the Raptors would have been eligible for, a different type of season the very next year. But they couldn't. And by the time Kawhi made his decision, which was kind of holding up the Raptors in the complete completely changes your financial, outlook if Kawhi comes back versus if Kawhi staying. Obviously, he's a max contract, super max contract. So I think in this case, I think the Raptors need to play hardball with Fred too. The problem is he has all the leverage. They allowed him to pad up his numbers and get his numbers back to looking right. He's played this 100% right. This whole way through, he's played it right. Not ethically right, not good for Scotty right, not good for the Raptors right, but for him, by his standards, he's played this correctly. He got his numbers up to the point where he would field a competitive number of offers. He timed his free agency. I don't know if he knew ahead of time that he would probably be the best point guard in this entire free agency class. He has all the advantages. All the advantages with the cap going up, right? There are a number of teams that could look at him that way. I think he's also protected. He's done a great job of sort of rebuilding his brand with all the media stuff that he did. Again, not in my book, but in the average NBA fan's eyes, Fred VanVleet was not the reason the Raptors struggled this year. And that's a problem because I think he was. But for a lot of people, it's Scotty's fault, it's OG's fault, it's Gary's fault, it's Pascal's fault. It's everybody else's fault. But Fred was fine. His analytics back that up, right? That he was great. His numbers, raw numbers, are respectable. They were not earlier in the season, but they are now. So he basically, made a bet on himself, and now he's cashing in on that, and he has the leverage. I think the Raptors should spot the snake in the grass, and I think they should probably, move away from Fred-centric thinking or Fred-centric team building, because I think it's completely crazy to be trying to build a team around what he's not going to do or what he's going to do. I think that's pretty nuts. Reports saying the Raptors are unsure of their direction for me is encouraging. If Masai thought Nick was the only issue, would be in trouble. They need to reevaluate Siakam and Fred's fit with Scotty. Fair. Absolutely. No, I'm not saying he's a slouch, but I am saying that this stuff is coming from somewhere. You don't understand that, right? I think a lot of stuff that's coming out about the Raptors right now is coming out of Fred's camp, right? This entire narrative that we've built up over the last month of the Raptors desperately want him back. The Raptors are unsure what to do. They're frustrated that he won't give them a commitment. I'm sorry, but who does this narrative help but Fred VanVleet? You have one of the most competitive and competent front offices in the NBA that has apparently just lost its mind trying to convince this one guy to come back. Well, what does that do for his market? And what would it have done for his market if the Raptors had just come out and said, we're not interested in bringing him back. We actually want to build around Scotty Barnes. What would that do to his market? I think it would crater his market because the Raptors, at the end of the day, are the team that can offer him the most money, right? I mean, they can pretty much match just about any offer on the table. Not that they have the right to because he's an unrestricted free agent, but I'm saying like they could, in theory, if they let Gary walk with no implications on, salary, whatever, like they could sign him for 35 million, I think 30-ish million. Like they could sign him for way over. And they have shown historically that they will do this for certain players. They did this for Kyle Lowry. They did this for Serge Ibaka. At the time that Serge signed his, I think it was 60 million, 3 years, there was not an offer out there that was even close to that. And when Kyle was signing those $32 million contracts, I don't think anyone out there was even close. Kyle almost left to go to the Spurs for a little less money. I mean, granted, you can talk about taxes in Texas or whatever, but like, I mean, I'm sorry, like there's no way that anyone was coming close to the dollars that they were willing to give Kyle. The value of these players ultimately was more to the Raptors than they was to anybody else. All right. All right, we're gonna bring on FA. FA, man, what's going on?
Hey, I'm good. How you doing?
I am good. I'm good. I like your background. Again,
Not my
your
house.
yeah, your fake house with your green screen. Nice. I like it. What's going on?
It's good. I've been listening for the last 30 minutes. I said, let me join quickly before you hop out. Hold on, let me tell my son to shut it down on the background. All right, I'm back. He's playing
Okay.
games. between games at the back behind me.
Hmm.
So what's
Okay.
going on?
What's going on indeed, man? I mean, just hasn't been a lot to talk about with the Raptors, right? Like obviously we can create videos every single time they interview somebody and say, well, is this guy the right candidate? Is this guy the right candidate? Is this guy the right person to draft? But really, it's been a lot of standing around waiting for something to happen with the
Mhm.
Raptors, I feel, over the last few weeks. And it's hard to think of like what the hell am I supposed to talk about? You know what I mean? Like, what are we supposed to talk about here? But I think after like June 1st, I want to get into
The
every
draft,
si-
right?
every single prospect that I think the Raptors could do. I'm open, I'm open to rethinking my take on Keontae George. Like, am I wrong? Am I right? I'm open to rethinking about Nick Smith,
I'm
but
looking at some of the lottery and the mock draft lottery. I think some Kayonte is moving to like top 10 in some of them right now. Then earlier you were talking about the leaks. I think the leaks are coming from the interview with coaches.
yeah, that's true
Mhm.
too, right? I
Yeah.
mean, you have a friend of Fred VanVleet's who just interviewed with the Raptors and JJ Redick.
And JJ already works for ESPN, so he can put.
That too.
Mhm.
And so if the Raptors presented, I mean, they have to be at least somewhat honest with him in that interview about what they're planning on doing and, what their questions are and what their main task is for next year and what their vision is. And so now they're having to share a little bit of that intel with all of these people, right?
Mhm.
That's leaky. That's leaky. If they tell him, "Oh, we really want Fred VanVleet back, but we're not sure what he's going to do." Well, that's going right to Fred. That's going
Yeah.
right to Fred. So I wonder, but what would you do?
I I think it's obvious that. Hold on a second. I think it's obvious that Masai is confused, right? Because of what's going on in the NBA right now, with like all the teams in the plane making the Eastern and Western Conference Finals. So they're confused if they want to run it back, but I wouldn't run it back, honestly speaking. But I think to me the obvious choice to trade is Pascal because Pascal and Scotty they pretty much just live on the same space. But I would like to keep OG at all cost. Because I think you can get something really good for Pascal, possibly to Houston or to Portland, even Detroit, because the 3, 4, and 5 picks they're in play. But is there any player in 4 and 5 that you really want?
No.
Yeah,
And I think that's the thing, right?
anybody you get 4 and 5, you can get something similar with the 13th pick. So
I think it's really important to realize that not all 14th picks or, not all 13th picks are equal, not all 5th picks are equal. And I think people have a tendency to discuss these things in a vacuum, right? Like, oh, the 5th pick typically doesn't get moved or whatever. But it's like, this is a top three draft. For a lot of people, this is a top three draft. We can debate Scoot and Brandon Miller, but there is a gap between Brandon Miller and the next guy, too, right? So there's a clear divide there. So I think that the offer to Portland has to be very different than the offer to Houston. I'm not sure you're getting, I don't think you're getting back enough value to move off of OG Anunoby for the 4th pick. I understand it's a
I
younger
think
asset.
for the first pick, it's like I'll do Pascal, not OG.
You think you would trade Pascal Siakam for what though? Emin Thompson, Azur Thompson, like Anthony
Yeah, yeah,
Black. What? Who's
but
the fourth player in this draft?
you're getting like Tari Esim back, and you're getting more future picks.
One of the things. Okay, now I understand that most of us are probably on the don't run it back, and you certainly seem to be in that camp, and I've been in that camp for the most part too. Continuity though is a major thing, and if you see the three teams that are currently still in the running, what is the one thing they have in common? They all have huge continuity. Their core has been together for a while, right? Jimmy and Kyle have been together for now 3 years. You have Tyler Hero, Duncan Robinson. They've both been there for a while. Max Strus, Bam Adebayo. This is a team that has been together. The very small ancillary pieces change. Denver Nuggets. They've been together for a while too. That core of Jokic, Malone, Jamal Murray, Michael Porter. That's 5+ years now for those guys, right? Together. And Aaron Gordon, recent ish addition, but he's had 3 years now there plus, I believe. And so I think that there is some sort of value in guys knowing each other and knowing how to play together. Now I understand the Raptors season ended disastrously, right? And so we can make an argument that okay, that's a good reason to move off of this. But I
But
think the contracts
those three teams, they have one player that can go get you a basket. We don't right now.
we don't right now, but if you believe that Scotty can become that type of player, then I think that changes some of the equation. And
Then
there's
if
no reason to believe he
he's gonna
can't.
become that kind of player, right? Letting Pascal go does not change anything because he can still do that without Pascal. Then you have a lot of pieces around him that can shoot, right? Because you see how what RocUK is doing. Is RocUK with a lot of shooters as well. If you bring everybody back, you bring the 13 pick.
I mean,
It
scoring
doesn't.
is scoring. Like you don't lose good players for nothing, right? Like I understand that the Siakam moving off of Siakam to me is all about contract. He's not a bad player at all.
It's not about player.
It's
I agree. Yeah.
it's about contract and it's about designation of star, right? So the theory goes that naturally if you move him out of the way that Scotty's more likely to ascend. But I don't think Pascal's a top 15 guy, and I don't necessarily think that it's necessarily a glowing endorsement for Scotty Barnes that he can't really take over the reins from a guy who's not a top 15 guy. He should be able to take the reins from him. The seamless fit, obviously, it's not a seamless fit. Neither one of these guys can shoot very well. Um, and obviously, with Jakob Poeltl
I think
in the middle,
you just answered because we're gonna bring Yakapoto back, right? Regardless of, then we have Yaka, Pascal, and Scotty in that paint. I don't see it working, to be honest. Scotty's not gonna
yeah. So
for the
like if you made a trade for Pascal to Houston, obviously you're taking back salary. I mean, you're not necessarily taking back salary because they do have cap space. They could literally give you cap space in a in a traded player exception. What would you want back? You would just want the fourth pick for Siakam. You would do it straight up.
I think Terry. I was looking at it. Terry Elson. Was he not the 17?
Tari Eason.
Terry Elson. Terry Elson. Then what's the name of this guy's son? The guy that went to the dunk contest.
I
Uh,
would honestly. I think it's tough, right? Because they do have cap space, and they probably have very solid plans to use that cap space on James Harden and or to facilitate a sort
mhm.
of trade with that number four pick potentially for Jalen Brown. If Jalen Brown wants out, I'm not really sure what kind of offer the Celtics are going to get that's going to beat the number four pick. Also, the team trading him has to ensure that he actually wants to be there. Seems to really admire, you know, I don't know. I don't know what a natural fit for him would be, but I think his time in Boston is kind of coming to a close. So I'll be very curious to see, if he chooses to go and be the man. What does that mean for Jalen Green? I don't think he necessarily fits that well with a James Harden,
It
Jalen
does too.
Brown, thing.
What do you
So
think of Jalen Green coming back for Pascal?
I don't like it at all. Not a fan. Not a fan. I understand, oh, he and Scotty, whatever, but I told you the same thing with the Anthony Simons situation. I don't like non-defenders. The same reason I don't like
What
Malik
about
Beasley.
what about late to Lakers for D'Lo and pick and their 17th pick?
D'Lo
Mm-hmm. Sign and
and
trade.
and the 17th pick.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting.
I think Lakers is really leaning on they're like thinking of Van Vliet seriously. You can see Van Vliet on his social with the clutch folks all over everywhere recently.
Yeah. I think he fits. I think he fits really well. I'm sort of surprised that they didn't pull the trade at the trade deadline, but they had a great deadline. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but if they want to maximize one final year of LeBron and AD, I think Fred VanVleet's about as good as players you can get to pair with those two.
Do you want D'Lo?
No, I don't. I would try to flip him to a third team. I'm just not a fan. I think to be he's been outplayed consistently, thoroughly, right? And in the fourth game where they got swept, they replaced him with Dennis Schroeder, and I didn't disagree with that decision at all. So, you know, I mean,
Is a regular season player.
he's a regular season player who can be schemed out in the playoffs. I think
Mhm.
more so than anything, I mean, these playoffs are sort of showing me that you can play one defensive liability and it's okay, right? The Raptors
Mhm.
don't really have defensive liabilities. The closest thing we've had to defensive liability is Gary Trent Jr., but you see the Miami Heat are having success even with Duncan Robinson on the court. I don't think Duncan Robinson is anywhere near the defender that Gary Trent Jr. is. I've also seen, obviously, a lot of people have complaints about the Denver defense, right? They don't have plus defenders across the board. They have a scheme that sort of hides some of their defenders, but who are the great defenders in Denver, right? And they're winning. So naturally, like they have the greatest offensive player, one of the greatest offensive players, one maybe the four greatest offensive players in NBA history. So that's making up for a lot of it. Offense, defense being schematically linked so much because their offense is so efficient and predictable. It doesn't result in a lot of turnovers, so they're naturally not having to guard in transition as much as most teams are.
And
But it's so interesting.
Even Gordon was able to guard LeBron and AD very well, at least.
Yeah. But I mean, like, look at what the Heat are doing. Like, really look at what the Heat are doing and ask yourself, apart from the equation of Jimmy Butler, because we don't have a Jimmy Butler type player on this team, a wing who can just go out and get his, like an alpha scorer, an alpha wing or a predator wing or whatever you want to call it. But everything else the Heat are doing, the Raptors did better. Forcing turnovers, limiting turnovers and forcing turnovers, winning that possession battle, gapping those passing lanes and forcing teams to choke it up. The Raptors were really good at this year. Everything I've watched from the Miami Heat is just making me think, what if the Raptors had actually gotten to the playoffs? Would we feel very differently about this team had we been able to see them? Because Fred, Scotty, they were trending in the right direction, in terms of just their play overall. And I just think that, I don't know, we'll never know. We'll
Yeah,
never know
I
what
think,
this team could have been in the playoffs.
the difference is that the Miami Heat, they have a lot of people that can shoot the rock, right? Obviously, they didn't
They
shoot the ball
didn't,
well during
though.
the
They didn't
season.
shoot well at all
They
during the
didn't shoot
season.
well. Well, last year, right? They shot the ball very well. So last season, so the season was up and down for them, but they've been shooting well in the playoffs. But if Otto Porter was in the with the Raptors, right, would have been different. But
Yeah, but even without Otto, like as I said before, like don't let the numbers fool you, right? Every single player on the Raptors shot below their expected value. I think Fred shot worse than expected. Gary, OG, Pascal, like all of these guys, Scotty even. I think all of these guys shot worse. Part of that is ball movement, part of that is tired legs on offense, part of that is, luck. But there's so much of this that can flip around for a month. And you just need it to flip around in the right month. Shooting variance is a real thing, and I just think that if you had to pick which team's a better shooting team, the Miami Heat or the Toronto Raptors, it was like flip, right? But now the Heat have been one of the best shooting teams in the playoffs, and everyone can't stop talking about how great they are at shooting because Gabe Vincent's hitting shots and Duncan Robinson's hitting shots, and it's like, how do we know that OG Anunoby wasn't going to have, or Will Barton wasn't going to have, or Fred VanVleet, or Gary. These are all extremely capable shooters.
but
Extremely.
not with the coach.
Okay, sure. But that's what I'm saying. Like, I
We
mean,
would have never known because ISO.
right, but again, like playoff defenses are different. They're going to gang up on Siakam more. There's going to be more space for shooters in the playoffs, right? Teams are like schematically trying to take like one thing away from you, and I think that typically does open things up for shooters. I also think Scotty's a different player in the playoffs, and I think that would also
But
create.
we saw that in the playing tournament in the second half, right?
Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know. I just think, everything the Heat are doing is something like the Heat and the Raptors were the most similar teams to me in the
Hmm.
entire play-in playoff situation. They were very similar, right? They coached the same way. They played very similarly. They had similar struggles, similar strengths and weaknesses. And the real difference between them is that Jimmy Butler is just a way better player than Pascal Siakam. But you swap those two teams, like you just swap that. Swap those two players. So Jimmy Butler goes on the Raptors, Pascal Siakam goes on the Heat, and the Raptors are much better than the Heat. like
Yeah,
much, much,
yeah,
much, much, much better than the
that's
Heat.
like adding. That's like what we did when we won the championship, right, with Kawhi.
But that's the problem though, because Jimmy
Mhm.
Butler's not a top 5 player. Most people don't regard him as a top 10 player. People think of him as a top 15 guy. So you're swapping one top 15 guy for one top 20 guy. Shouldn't be that big a difference, but it
Yeah,
is.
but I think Butler coached a lot during the regular season, and when it comes to the playoff, then he takes it to a different level.
I
So,
think he had a great season. I think he had his. I think I don't think this is a hot take to say that Jimmy Butler had the best season of his career this year.
but
He was
it was.
efficient as hell.
Mm-hmm.
He was good defensively, offensively. He across the board he was
It,
great,
it was
and
efficient. Butler is always efficient, right? But he doesn't put the numbers because Butler is a
he didn't
very
play the minutes. He didn't play
unselfish
the
player.
minutes.
He's a very unselfish player. He likes to share the rock.
Dude, his numbers were excellent. Well, I think people are looking at the wrong numbers because they're looking at points per game or whatever. But like, man, his analytics were off the chart. I think
Exactly.
very
That's
easily
exactly my
make a case
point,
that he was a top
right?
5 player this year, right?
If,
So
same thing with Scotty, right? Even though Scotty didn't put the numbers right, his analytics are always good because, like he,
his analytics were okay this year.
apart from the shooting, right? Other things that he does, like the rebounding, the assists, the disruption, and things like that.
Oh my God, someone's saying the Bucks just hired Adrian Griffin.
Oh wow,
Did that actually just happen?
I'm looking. Wow.
Yep, just happened 4 minutes
Yes.
ago.
Yes. Wow.
That's
Wow.
incredible.
Wow. Giannis power. Giannis wanted it in Griffin. So Nick Nurse is likely going to finish. Oh,
Wow, you talk about taking L's for the Toronto Raptors. I mean, this was the one guy
wow.
internally that you had a chance at hiring. And also, this was
Wow.
one guy that you were probably trying to keep on your coaching staff as your lead assistant
Wow.
to your next coach. So, yikes.
Wow. This is big. Jerry,
Wow.
Jerry,
Well, congratulations to Adrian Griffin.
Adrian
Really
Griffin to
solid
the
dude.
box. Adrian Griffin to the box. Wow.
I
Wow.
mean, congratulations to Adrian Griffin, man. I mean, like, I like people getting their first chance. And honestly, I think he's
Adrian
going to be.
Griffin to the box. Wow.
I'm happy for him. I think
I'm
he's going to
happy
do
for
really.
I'm happy
I
for
think
him.
he's going to do really well there.
That's a right spot for him, honestly speaking.
I think it's great,
Yeah.
and
Wow.
yeah, I mean that's awesome,
It's
and I
a
think what
it's a,
one
it's a players' league. Giannis wanted him.
I mean that's so interesting that Giannis wanted him, but like wow, I mean this was odds on one of the leading candidates for the Raptors job the entire way through, and now
I didn't want him, honestly speaking. I don't want a drink Griffin.
I didn't want him either, to be honest.
I like this guy from either the assistant coach of Sacramento, assistant coach of Nuggets, David Adaman, or
I think he'll be good. But yeah, like I think there's just a need for a new voice that does not have
I
any
agree.
association with
I
with
agree.
the previous thing. And because Griffin was really seen as Nick Nurse's right hand man and probably like, birds of a feather sort of, element there. But the Bucks are just such an interesting. I wonder if the Raptors' entire coaching process was eventually going to.
Nick Nurse pulled out of the interview process with Bucks.
Wow,
Yeah,
is that a favor to Griff, or is that him
yeah.
maybe having a job offer in Philly? It'd be so interesting with all the shit that that Joel Embiid has talked about Nick Nurse, if he ends up being coached by Nick Nurse, and I think that would be a really good fit for them too.
I think even though all this been saying about him is out of respect, right? Not.
Can you imagine next year if Nick Nurse does coach the Sixers, and then we have to face the Sixers, the Bucks,
Wow.
and we have to face the Pistons back to back to
Wow.
back? You just imagine that. You just see like a coaching carousel of former Raptor bosses. Someone saying, "Don't worry, JJ Redick is still available." I don't
Wow.
care.
Steve Nash. Steve Nash. Forget Steve Nash. Then I'll stop being a Raptors fan.
No, I think this idea. First of all, the Bucks have an established culture. Giannis is that culture. Brooke Lopez, Drew Holiday, Chris Middleton. I mean, if they keep Chris Middleton, there is a culture there. So Griff just needs to come and
I
not
think
ruffle feathers.
Nick Nurse is going to Nick Nurse is going to probably going to finish. Van Vliet just
Phoenix
possibly, yeah. Van Vliet just tweeted, well deserved.
for Adrian Griffin.
Yeah, well deserved.
That's great. Yeah, no, look, I'm happy for him. He all of his interviews, everything I've ever seen from him always just spoke to just a really solid human being.
I don't think he would have been a good coach for Toronto. I don't. I need a coach that can move the ball and things like that. It's good for Giannis because they have a dominant player in Giannis, but not for Toronto.
I think, he's learned a lot. I think he's going to be a player coach,
He's gonna
right?
be a player coach, right? But
100%.
I need somebody that can. I need somebody that can move the ball, and ball movement and different schemes. Not Nick, not Griffin.
Did you ever look at Mike D'Antoni?
No, I don't want him.
You don't want him in.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, I just,
If
I
you go for Mike D'Antoni, then you have to trade Jacopo.
think
He
he could
does.
adapt.
He does.
I
He
think
doesn't
just
want.
ultimately what I want is someone who sees the vision for this team going forward as Scotty at point. I really need to see like someone who has a track record or at least an idea of how to run a big point and create that sort of vision. And I think that that's why David Adelman is such a seamless fit, or Jordi Fernandez to be honest, because they both come from the Denver system of having this gigantic
Yeah.
playmaker. And Fernandez, now is being elevated now, talked about a lot because of the success that the Sacramento Kings had in implementing a lot of the same stuff with that they used to do in Denver with Jokic. It's
So say you have to
interesting.
pick from between Adaman or Fernandez, who would you pick?
I think I would pick Fernandez. I would pick Jordy Fernandez. I just love him. I think like I've just spent so much time listening to his interviews, listening to him talk, and I'm just like, this is the type of person who could really connect with Scotty and OG. I think this is a guy who can elevate them and he can motivate them, but he can also put them in positions to succeed. And I think that that's sort of what the Raptors need is a generational type of personality. The Bucks don't need that. They have a culture. They don't need a culture starter. They don't need a culture setter. They don't need a strong personality to come in and ruffle feathers and confront people. They don't. They need someone who's unassuming, who won't make waves, who can make good or decent adjustments, who is well respected by the players, and won't try to again, like he won't ruffle feathers. And I think that that's sort of the perfect spot for Griffin. If it's one coach where I'm like, okay, what's the perfect place for Adrian Griffin? It would have been Milwaukee, and I'm glad that he got that job. But for the Raptors, they need someone enthusiastic, creative, young, inspiring, someone who has a
So
track record for
if you're going
development.
with either of those two coaches, do you rebuild around Scotty and let Pascal go, or do you keep the core?
I mean, honestly, I could see it working both ways. I really could. I could see the Raptors, keeping Pascal Siakam and still building around Scotty Barnes. I don't think there's any doubt that they are building around Scotty Barnes. Long term, you do not trade a guy for Kevin Durant if you're not building around him. He's obviously a part of the core, right? Even where his locker is relative to every other player on this team shows me that this is the guy for them going forward. He has to,
And
obviously do it.
what of the point guard position?
I would like to see Scotty paired with an off-ball combo guard. I think
Like
it's the best possible
like
situation for him. So you have Jokic, who often initiates the point, right? You
mhm,
often have Jimmy Butler initiating point, right?
mhm.
Jimmy brings the ball up a lot, right? He initiates the offense a lot. It's a great way to, do that. Jason Tatum is bringing the ball up a lot. Who's playing point? Marcus Smart, combo guard. Derek White, combo guard. Malcolm Brogdon, combo guard. Jamal Murray, combo guard. Gabe Vincent, combo guard. Kyle Lowry at this stage in his career, also a combo
Who
guard.
do you
There's
see as a
not
combo guard in this draft? I mean,
Case and Wallace. Case and Wallace, Scoot Henderson. This is to me like this
I don't,
is the
it's what
ideal pairing for Scotty Barnes.
it might not be there. What of Anthony Black?
He definitely won't be there. He's not going to be there. Either pick you pick. If you're picking
What,
three, he's too high. If you pick 13, he's too low. So
you can pick him 4 or 5.
pick him four. Well,
Mm.
if you're going that route, then why not one of the Thompson twins? Like you not see more upside in one of those guys than Anthony Black. Like I like Anthony Black. It's just pairing him with Scotty is a lot of the same things. You know, it's a
Hmm.
lot of the same stuff. I'm sure they would be fast friends. Like they would be the best friends in the history of the universe, probably. But the problem is, okay, he's made a lot of shots at the pro day. I still don't like that form.
I don't
It's
like the
too
form.
low.
It's too
It's
low. I was watching the form. It's too low and it's really slow. Hmm?
it is
I don't.
slow, and I mean
I
he's
don't
big.
like the
He's a bigger
form.
playmaker, so maybe he'll be an off-ball spacer. But if he wants to
Um,
take the next step in terms of like Scotty's form looks so much better right now. It to me looks great. Like
because
he can get that shot off against anybody. It's not getting blocked. It's not getting swiped. It's not really getting contested.
Sculling form was never really that bad, right? But sometimes it feels like he's overthinking. That's why when it's always
It
almost
felt
short.
disjointed. It felt
When
disjointed.
it's close to the shot clock, right? Its shots are better. But when it's not the shot clock, it pushes the shots kind of, and possibly because of the injury he had. But he doesn't like flick the wrist a lot. Like, but when it's close to shot clock, you see that's why he makes all those shots, right? But when he
Mhm.
overthinks it, he kind of pushes the shot.
Yeah. I mean, he definitely has a lot of success with the clock running down and, you know, later in games when he's
But
not
even,
thinking as
but
much.
this guy Brandon Miller, his shot is low but effective too, right? It's not. It doesn't. His release point is low.
It is lower than
He's a
you would
really
like it to be for
he's a
sure.
really good shooter, though.
I don't know. I'm cool. Like I think it would be great to see the Raptors get a combo guard like Scoot at three, and then double down with a guard,
Kobe, what up,
like
Kobe?
Kobe Buffkin.
I like
Like
Kobe.
I think so to me it's like if the Raptors come out of this draft with either Kobe, Kaysen, or Scoot, or both, like two of those
Hmm.
guys, then I think you have the makings of a great team going forward. I think that that is the type of player you pair with Scotty Barnes. And I think all three of those guys have shooting potential. Scoot has shooting potential. He needs to work on it. Kaysen has shooting potential. He's been good and bad, you know, but he is going to be a shooter. Um, I think, yeah, I'm not putting it past the Raptors to go wing here. But if they did go wing and it's not Bilal, who would it be for you? So like there's so many players that fit though.
There's so many wings. This draft is a wings draft, right? So
It is.
that's why I wouldn't mind trading Van Vliet to Lakers and get the 17th pick because there's so many, you can get some really good players around that pick.
Yeah. Let me look at the
What's the name of this guy the Raptors worked at? What's his name again? Maxwell. He can really shoot the ball.
yeah. Let's see, like NBA Draft.net, which is not reliable at all, but they have how do you feel about Cam Whitmore, man? Like watching Cam Whitmore live was very interesting. Like
He's,
seeing how he moves, his athleticism is going to wow somebody. I think he might go number 4.
I think it's. I think if Toronto wants to take number 4 pick, I think they're likely going to get Cam Whitmore.
You like him?
I like him. Yeah,
Some people, I mean, I,
he's strong, NBA body. He can really kind of player that can go
I
get you.
think there's a sort of thing where like people project what they want to see, right? So you ask yourself like, how did someone like Stanley Johnson go so high? He looks like an all-star, moves like an all-star. Kind
Mm-hmm.
of you can see the pathway to him being an all-star, right? You look at guys like that sometimes and you say, how much is the eye test going to really pop when it comes to a pro day situation where they're going 1-on-0 and they're just going up against chairs and pylons? And someone like Cam Whitmore can really blow you away in that setting. I do see issues in terms of his game film, though, in terms of his feel and overall passing and all that other stuff. But in terms of like having an NBA ready body, you take a guy with that strength and that skill set and that athleticism and put him at the NCAA level, they should dominate. But a lot of those advantages are going to go away in the NBA, where he's just going to be just another wing. He's not that special athletically that it's going to be like,
Don't you think Scoot is going to face the same problem?
no, because Scoot's strengths are his brain. And that's different. Because
Mm-hmm.
right now, let's say there's 450 players in the NBA, right? Next year there'll also be 450 players in the NBA plus two ways, whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think Scoot immediately walks in as one of the 50 smartest players in the NBA on day one. I think he's that good, that smart. So all of that athleticism and upside and all that, what skill development that he does, I think that's just going to be cherry on top, right? But he can play in the league right now. He knows the game. He sees the game. The most interesting comment, and I'll just close it off with this because I don't want to do 2 hour live, but like
Yeah, before
most
you
int-
told this, what about Maxwell with Lewis, Marcel Lewis?
what do you like about him?
I don't know. I'm just asking. I know Toronto like him because of the shooting.
Like him where though? Like him at 13?
He's some of the draft pick. He's moved up to top. It's I think I'm looking at NBA draft.net. It's number 12 now. It's short of the draft like after workouts.
I think he's long. It makes sense. But defensively, just didn't like what I saw from him in the game film,
Hmm.
right? Like he just kind of gets lost off the ball a lot. Um, Physically, I don't know if he's ready for the NBA. He's very skinny. So yeah, that those would be my main things. He's not jumping off at me. The way he moves is pretty smooth. But if it's between him and Bilal, I probably lean Bilal, to be honest.
I think
Um,
you're picking either of them, then you're thinking of rebuilding.
yeah, I think yeah, to close this off, like one of the things that I realized, like I was listening to LeBron James post game after getting swept, right, by the Denver Nuggets. And he talked about how he feels about Nikola Jokic, right? Specifically, he talks about, he's like, I'm not surprised. He didn't show me anything new. I know who he is. I know what
Hmm.
he's like, most people don't understand the game, but I understand the game and I see what he's doing. And it
Hmm.
just reminded me, this is why, people are so high on Scotty.
And that
In
is
my,
that's why we trade Pascal and let's call the be the man.
that too,
I don't
that
care whether
too.
like let him start getting in the weeds right now and we start going with him. Period.
Right. And that's sort of the intangible quality that I like about Scoot, right? And also Wembenyama, to be honest, but more so Scoot, which is that he really does understand the building blocks of the game. He understands the angles. He sees where his teammates are going to be. He reads and reacts appropriately. He has the right mentality about being unselfish. He's
I
a
think
very
that
unselfish
this
player.
guy sees the game very well too. Bilal Coulibaly. It says
I think he's also got a really good feel for the game as well.
it
So
does. The way he
so
rebounds, the
so
way he calls,
that's
the way of yeah,
that's exactly it. Most people assume that if you're dominating the NCAA level, Division One or whatever, you're dominating Europe. You must really understand the game, and it's just not true. A lot of people play this game without understanding the game. A lot of people are able to, sort of just athletically get by. It does catch up with you eventually. It usually gets schemed out. Maybe in the playoffs, it'll get schemed out, and you'll struggle because suddenly all those decisions that you were making. Like you often watch like an offensive possession with the Denver Nuggets or whatever, and you'll see sometimes the guy stalls by half a second to make a pass, or he takes half a second too long to gather something, and the entire advantage that was being created by that sequence of passes is gone, right? You just don't want too many guys who disrupt that rhythm of the ball, right? And typically speaking, you get two guys like Scoot and Scotty on the same freaking team, suddenly the ball is just they are the system. They would become the offensive system. One guy high, one guy low. They can invert it. They can play off of each other. I mean, the potential for these two, and not to mention, the personality fit of just two unselfish guys playing together. I again reiterate, I would move mountains to get Scoot Henderson. I think he's going to be fantastic,
and for
and
that same
I
reason,
just don't feel that way
that's
about
why
Brandon
Anthony,
Miller. Hmm?
Anthony Black is high on my list.
He's great too. I just think that when it comes to pairing players together, you want a healthy amount of similarity and dissimilarity, and I think that he has a lot in common with Scotty. Just way too much for my liking. And sometimes players like that, as we are talking about with Pascal and Scotty, can sometimes get in each other's way. That being
What do you think
said,
of Casey Wallace and the back injury?
what about it?
He had some back issues during the NCAA season. I think he had a back sprain or whatever. Then you can see that
If
in
they're if the medical staff clears
defense.
it,
Yeah.
yeah, like if the staff clears it, if he passes the physical, but the Raptors have had players in the past. Like I mean, Michael Porter Jr. is a great example of someone who fell because of injury concerns. Um, OG Anunoby is a guy who fell maybe 15 spots because of his injury concerns down to 23 to the Raptors. sometimes injury concerns can be a bit of a blessing in disguise, not for the prospect, but for the team that eventually picks them. Because if your medical staff is trustworthy and you trust them and you trust this thing to heal, and you don't have concerns, it's enough to spook a lot of teams out of picking these guys top seven, top eight, because nobody wants
Yes,
to pick a
same
guy
way
who's
that
gonna.
Wemby dropped to three, right? Because of the injury.
That's another guy who dropped because of injuries. Nerlens Noel dropped because of injuries. Um, Again, a lot of guys have, right? And sometimes it's been right, and sometimes it's been wrong. Greg Oden had injury concerns, and people didn't drop him, and they should have, right? So sometimes, too much caution, whatever. But I think with Kaysen, if your medical staff clears it, I think if he falls down to 13 because some team at 10 or 11 has him dead even with somebody else, like whoever, like, and they decide to pick him. But I think this is just the type of draft where someone falls. And if Kaysen is that guy, you scoop him out at 13 and you say thank you very much and walk away. I think Rafael Barlow has been comparing him to Kawhi Leonard, like a shorter Kawhi Leonard, and I really like that comparison. I think it's imaginative. It's not as dead brained as, oh, he's Drew Holiday. He's not Drew Holiday. He does have a lot more in common with Kawhi Leonard than anything else. He's just a shorter Kawhi Leonard, and I think that has that comes down to his mentality, to his approach to the game, but also just his defensive intensity and how disruptive he is as a defender. So I really like Kaysen. Obviously, like Kobe Buffkin. There's like 6 different directions the Raptors can go where I have no concerns on draft night. I hope they will pick the right direction.
What if some of the power forwards fall to 13, like somebody like Taylor Hendricks or Jarvis Walker? What would you do?
Cry, probably.
You're not gonna
Like
pick
it, like if they pick Keontae George, Taylor Hendricks, whatever. Like I'm cool with, as I've mentioned before several times now. My scale goes like I want Scoot at 3. If he's there, do anything to get him. At 13, obviously, if Kaysen falls, you run for the hills. You take him and you run. If you leave this draft with Kaysen Wallace and Scoot Henderson, you get A plus 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 plus, the greatest draft in NBA history. Okay, like you've set yourself up for the next 15 years. I mean, 10 years, given how things go in the NBA these days. There's a lot of directions the Raptors can take at 13 that I would have no issue with. I would have no issue with Kobe Buffkin if they decide that he's the guy and they see something in him. He's long, he's rangy, he's got like excellent, excellent potential to be a great NBA player. You start talking about guys who will do better with more space. He's one of those players that will do better with more space. He'll be able to talk
and
space in a
and
way
can
that I think
can
might surprise some people.
can score around the rim a lot.
Yes. And
Mhm.
I think, Jordan Hawkins is a guy that I think again benefits from having
I
a
need
lot
two.
of
I
lot
need
around
two
him.
first round picks.
Sometimes you can have too much, but yes, I agree.
That's
The
true.
Raptors can go young and be competitive next year. Okay, fine. You don't want to surrender a lottery pick to the San Antonio Spurs, but I think that this is probably the wrong way to look at things, right? The 2024 draft sucks. It just sucks. Everyone's saying it sucks. I've looked at the prospects. Honestly, there are guys who are scheduled to go top 5 that probably wouldn't be lottery picks this year. So
But I
what you're
think the
really,
problem with that trade is that it's top six protected for 3 years, right? So you can trade your picks for the next 3 years. So
yes, you have a high, high, high level of incentive to convey that pick, which means that you can't be bottom feeder bad next year. That would suck. It would suck to be like
no, but
so
you
bad
cannot do
next
trade.
year
You cannot do any trade with any other team. You can't trade your first round pick for the next 3 years,
until you
and that's the
convey
same
that pick.
problem that yeah, that's the
Until
same
you
problem
convey that pick.
Portland.
So let's say
Yeah,
let's say for instance, okay, let's say for instance you lose for VanVleet and you do end up rebuilding and it doesn't go super well and you end up with the 10th pick next year. And you
and
obviously don't get to keep that 10th pick because it goes to San Antonio Spurs. What if you really lost though? You've lost a 10th pick that in most drafts probably goes 20th or 18th
mhm.
or 17th. That's not really that big a loss. I know it sucks and you probably
Yeah,
want
but
to
the
keep a top
problem
10
is
pick.
that if there's a star that becomes available, right, you can't really trade three picks for 3 years right now, and that's the problem that Portland
But
is
that's what I'm
facing.
saying. Until you
So, so,
convey it,
so yeah, so
until you convey
Portland
it.
is trying to I think they're trying to get back in the draft by getting trading their 23rd pick to Chicago because their pick right now with Chicago is like top. lottery protected for the next 3 years.
Hmm.
For Lance Junior.
Well, what I'm saying is, once you convey that pick, this
Mm-hmm.
entire thing goes away. Now you
Yeah.
can suddenly, so you have a high incentive to trade to convey that pick, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So you can convey that pick by being the 20th pick, 16th pick, 14th pick, in which case you probably feel a little bit better, right? You
Mm-hmm.
didn't give up a top 10 pick. Or you can convey the 8th pick or ninth pick and just be like, who fucking cares?
I
Because
agree.
at the end of the day, yes, you did trade the ninth pick and you traded Cam Birch and you traded 2 second round picks. Are any of those assets likely to be better than Jakob Poeltl?
No.
Probably not. So
Okay.
at the end of the day, who cares? The disaster of this would actually be you end up top five next year, you pick a lackluster prospect at
And then
fourth or
and
fifth,
then the next
and the
draft.
next year you suck,
Yes.
and
Mm-hmm.
then you end up giving like the seventh or eighth pick, and
Yes.
now you're screwed because the 2025 draft is loaded. The value of maybe the 15th pick in 2025 will probably be higher than the value of the eighth pick in 2024.
I
So
agree.
that could be the disaster that the Raptors should look to avoid, not the immediate gratification of, oh, ego trip. We don't want to give a top 10 pick because then it makes the Jakob Poeltl trade look worse. No,
And
actually,
alternatively, if Koloko becomes really good, you can easily trade Yakapoda and get a first round pick.
I mean, look, obviously the greatest situation here would be the Raptors become title contenders next year and the Spurs get the 30th pick. That's
Mm-hmm.
obviously the greatest scenario for all parties involved, except for the Spurs. And obviously, with them just getting Victor Wembanyama, I don't want to give them any more help, personally. But I think, it doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, the pick is gone, the pick is gone. It doesn't matter. At this point, the Raptors should do what is right. They should not be holding on to Fred VanVleet and extending Pascal Siakam because of the ego drop of, oh, I don't want to give the Spurs, the eighth pick or the. Either way, you're fucking giving the pick,
Mm-hmm.
right? At the end of the day, if you give them the eighth pick or you give them the 15th pick, what difference does it make to you, right? You're not keeping it either way. Does it make a difference? It doesn't make a difference at all. I think the only difference that it will make is did you give the eighth pick and have all of these absolutely disastrous contracts on your table because you were trying not to give the eighth pick? That would be the worst. So I
Mm-hmm.
hope that the Raptors can sort of understand that. Obviously, if we could all build a time machine, I'm pretty sure we don't do the Jakob Poeltl trade and we tank. And now we're talking about the top five, top six pick in this draft. We didn't do that, but let's move on. It cannot be a talking point for the
I
entire
think
summer.
if the Spurs can turn things around, turn back time, they wouldn't have traded Yakapodo because it would have been a good fit with
I don't think he
Wemby.
would have been a good fit at all with Wembanyama. And I think he's trading Jakob Poeltl is how they got Wembanyama, because if you kept Jakob Poeltl, you
They
probably
would
win
have
4 or 5 more wins,
true.
maybe 3 more wins. Because honestly, the one thing that I respected about the Spurs, despite the fact that they traded away all of these really good players, they traded away Derek White, Thaddeus Young, DeJounte Murray. They traded away some of my favorite players, in the league to become this bad. They never played bad. Does that make sense? They continued to play well. They played well with what they had. They just didn't have very much. And I think that that's great because now the guys who are actually there have been trying to win all year. They just didn't have enough talent. Now they can add talent back. They have draft picks. They have the number one overall pick. They probably have some cap space. And they have a really good general manager in RC Buford. So they're able to, they're gonna be able to build something competitive around Victor Wembanyama in the next, I want to say 24 months.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But the Raptors definitely helped them. The Raptors and Celtics are the biggest reasons, in my opinion, that the Spurs got Wembanyama, and they have all of these extra picks from those trades that they can now leverage to help Wembanyama. Or maybe they trade a lot of those future picks. Like what's stopping them from trading some of those future picks to get back into this draft and get another player, because they obviously want a guard in this draft. And I can tell you that the Raptors and Spurs and Heat and Celtics and Thunder, these teams tend to prioritize the same things, in my opinion. Like, if I think they would all have very similar drafts boards because of just the people who are running those teams. Other teams, totally, wild. I don't know what the Pacers are going to do, what the Blazers are going to do, whatever. But I think with those five teams, there's some consensus.
And
And
that's
if
why everybody's expecting what's his name to go Bila Coulibaly to go number 12 to OKC.
he would fit. He fits the model. He fits exactly what they want to do. And,
But
that kind of sucks for the Raptors is
the
that
Spurs
they
they
have
like
it.
the Spurs they like Casey Wallace and Anthony Black.
I think the Spurs would really like Anthony Black, and I think pairing Anthony Black and Victor Wembanyama would be a dream come true. I also think pairing Case and Wallace with Victor Wembanyama would be a dream come true. I also think if somehow they could swing it off, I don't think they can. I don't think they have the assets to do it. But if they could somehow end this draft, regardless of how many future picks they have to trade to get it, if they could end with Scoot and Wembanyama, Spurs are going to be really good.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, thanks a lot for calling in, FA. Really appreciate it. And good conversation as always, man.
All right, thanks everybody. Yeah.
Cheers, man. Alrighty. Okay. Well, that's been a nice little return to doing lives, despite not having a beard anymore. That's been a weird adjustment. Every time I catch myself in the mirror, I'm like, who is that? Who's that person? So going into June, what I would like to do, and you can definitely let me know in the comments below if there's a particular player that you definitely want something on. I would like to get back to regularly scheduled content. Specifically, I want to do video breakdowns, which will not be lives, where I can do the graphic stuff and, kind of get back to what this channel really started out with last summer. And I would like to do lives after every single game. So it'll probably be, you know, one draft video, 10 minutes every single day on what I like about certain player, whatever. It'll be a commitment for sure, a time commitment, but I spent the last couple of days, let's say 4 or 5 days, catching up on some editing projects, launching up Pendance 2024 prep, and also organizing my hard drives. Man, I have like thousands and thousands and thousands of videos and graphics, and they're super disorganized, and every time I want to edit something or edit a video or whatever, it's always more complicated because it's just all over the place. So taking that extra time to declutter not only the space, but then also like my girlfriend and I were in the process of like reorganizing our home, like trying to get everything out because I live in a pretty old building and they're just ripping out the hallways right now. They're ripping out the carpets, the doors, everything. And they're renovating everything. And I was like, man, wouldn't it be nice, to enter the 2023-2024 season with everything new, everything organized, everything tossed out, everything decluttered. So that's sort of the process that I'm going through the last few days. I have a couple more editing gigs to finish up, but I'll be back to, that's funny. I look like a Ute now. Um, how old do I look? I mean, I'm 35 years old. I have no idea how old I actually look. But yesterday I did get carded and I was just like, oh my God. Oh no, not this shit again. But yeah, apparently I do look younger. Someone saying baby-faced assassin. That's funny. Anyway, I look forward to watching the Celtics and the Heat. Honestly, this has been some of the best basketball that I have seen in my life. This playoff run has been incredible. I hate the fact that Pendance interfered with the playoffs for me. I love Pendance with all my heart, but there's a reason why it's a winter festival because May and June is all basketball for me. And it kind of sucks that this year I had to split my attention between the two. And to be honest, like I sort of half paid attention to both. And I hate doing that. I hate having to split my time between two things. So Law saying you look 22, you look 15 without the beard. I'll tell you something funny. So when I want to say about 26, 27, I went to a high school to do a motivational speech. Like, it was motivational in the sense that I want to talk about like overcoming situations, right? I'll share a cool quote with you guys afterwards, but just about overcoming situations and all that stuff. And someone said hall pass, where's your student ID? And I looked over and it was like the hall monitor person and they were just like, I'm like, bro, I'm like 26, 27 years old. What are you asking? I'm like, I'm here to speak. You know what I mean? That was kind of weird. But honestly, in recent years, I've started to look a lot older and stand a lot older and just be out of shape. So I don't know. Last few days, I've been trying to get back to eating healthy and just feeling more like myself, man. Like I saw some pictures from Pendants and I look like I don't know, like a Yeti or something. So it's good to get back to being myself. The quote that I want to share with you is something that's been just sort of spiraling in my head. And you know that sometimes towards the end of these lives, we leave it on something to think about, something to ponder. Um, this quote's been sort of circling around in my head a lot lately. and said, "A ship does not sink because of the water around it. A ship sinks because of the water that gets into it." Now think about that 10 times a day for the rest of your life, and I think you get the point. There's so many things around us, right? That's one of the things I always try to convey to the kids, right? Regardless of what your situation's like, you have pee in your elevator, you got gunshots going on, you got drugs in the stairwell, and you got all this nonsense and noise around you, but you gotta cut it out. You gotta censor it out, because the minute it starts to impact you is when it gets in you. If it stays outside, it doesn't bother you. It's when it gets inside. It's the same thing with betrayal. It's the same thing with loss. The same thing with your financial situation, everything. If it stays outside, it stays outside. It stays outside of you. But when it gets inside, when you start to take that betrayal, if someone betrays your trust and you're like, well, maybe I'm not someone worth loving, or someone rejects you for a job and you say, well, maybe I'm not someone worth hiring, or you get a divorce and you say, well, maybe I don't deserve to be happy. Well, now you've taken it in, and now your ship will sink. So that's sort of my uplifting note for the end of this live. Make sure to hit subscribe if that resonates with you, or if anything I've said in the last hour and a half has resonated with you. And we will be back to doing lives, I want to say next week, but good luck to the Boston Celtics. Obviously, I'm rooting for the Celtics. I love Jimmy Butler. I love Kyle Lowry, but Jason Tatum is one of my five favorite players in the NBA, and I'm definitely rooting for him. Mohammed Lay is saying, "How are you, Pensare fam?" I'm good. I'm good, man. Kawhi has massive hands and unbelievable strength for his position. Not a single dribble or movement is wasted. His shot became lethal. Is Casey going to develop into this kind of player on offense? I mean, obviously, when you talk about a guy who's 6'2" and a half, 6'3", versus a guy who's 6'7" and a half, you're talking about different situations, right? You're talking about different advantages. He's not nearly as long. His hands aren't nearly as big, but I just think it's from the Kawhi Leonard of guards, if you could think about that, right? Like, I think you kind of get the point there. Really, really hope it's Kaysen. But if you scroll back about 40 minutes ago, I went through the list of guys that I'd be happy with. I think there's about 6, 7 names that I'd be pretty happy with. There's a lot of guys that fit the Raptors mold this offseason. And look, I mean, if I know that perhaps people would have been a lot better off or a lot happier if the Raptors had made an impulse decision on who their next coach was going to be, or, it's a clear directive on who they're going to hire. But I've said this before, I'll say it again. It is a really good time to reevaluate your core principles. It's a really good time to reevaluate your roster. It's a really good time to evaluate new data. And I think good organizations, they don't get lost, but they allow themselves to not force conclusions, right? If there isn't an obvious coaching candidate for you, I don't think you need to jump into it. Oh man, okay. RocUK, what's up, man? I was gonna
Yeah, what's
end
up?
this. I was on the verge of ending this live, and you popped up. What's going on, man?
No, yeah, listen, I just thought it's appropriate for me to come onto this live chat, seeing as you're now a babyface. And the last time we spoke, I was
People were
called out for
saying
being a babyface, right?
that's
So,
hilarious, but you still have a beard, and you still a baby face. But when I put on a
yeah,
beard, like I'm easily my age. So yeah,
yeah, yeah. Yeah, that was it earlier. I don't really have much to add to what
you
you've
just
already
came on
spoke.
to gloat about your great skincare routine. That's basically what you came on to talk about.
That and encourage you to take your supplements, and that'll help you to look young as well,
Supplements,
Yes.
like what? Vitamins?
Vitamins, yeah. Vitamin C, D, B12.
I was insanely healthy for a bit. It's kind of funny. Like, so in 2017, I looked like I was 100 years old. It was just something. I was like burned out. I wasn't sleeping right. Whatever.
Yeah.
2020, I looked exactly like I look right now. And then it's just like I've been oscillating between like these two extremes of looking very, very unhealthy and very healthy for about 7 years. But the healthy always looks the same, and the unhealthy always looks the same. So I haven't really aged for the last 10 years, I don't think. You know, there are people who meet me like at, there's some
Yeah,
people who meet me at a good part when they met me at a bad part, and they're like, "You're aging in reverse." And then there are people who meet me at a good part and then a bad part, and they're like, "You've aged 100 years in the last 3 years." And it's like I'm just oscillating between these two extremes of healthy and unhealthy. But yeah,
yeah,
we're moving towards healthy and trying to find balance in life, and I think that
yeah.
that's important and really important to find balance. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, and also do what you love. You know, you have a passion for film, you have a passion for the Raptors, and you're doing what you love on a daily basis. You know,
that
you're
is
going to
huge.
work and you're happy and passionate about what you do. And a lot of people, probably the majority of the population, cannot say that. So I think you should cherish that, and that's just something that you can, use to motivate yourself. I'm very happy with what I do.
What do you do?
And if I wasn't, I'm in marketing.
Hmm.
Yeah, so I market properties for sale. I don't know if you have it over there. It's called shared ownership. Um, I
Okay.
haven't lived in Canada for like over 12 years, so I don't even know what you guys have there anymore. But yeah, shared ownership properties. I market them for a living. So and I'm very happy with what I do. Keeps me, I got a great team I work with, and I look
Hmm.
forward to going into the office. And that's a big part of it because it's not always been that way for me. So
You know, that's really interesting. I think my girlfriend and I were just talking about this the other day. We are talking about purpose, you know, having an alignment with purpose in what you do. And it doesn't always have to be, you know, I'm saving the oceans or I'm saving the planet or whatever. It's just I think there has to be a certain criteria that you meet with your job. Not have to meet, but ideally you want something that's predictable but also unpredictable,
mm,
challenging but also something you're good at. For me, you know, every single thing that I do, there's like a sort of three checklist. It's and if it's 2 out of 3, I'll do it, and if it's less than 2 out of 3, I won't do it. So it's is it sufficiently meaningful? Is it sufficiently challenging? And does it pay sufficiently well? And that's really it. That's all I
yeah,
care about. Is just those 3 things. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if I'm doing COVID research, which I did. It doesn't matter if I'm doing stats breakdowns. It doesn't matter if I'm at a hedge fund. It doesn't matter if I'm running a dog walking company or a tutoring company or, you know, running a basketball podcast or a self-help podcast or running a
yeah,
film festival or making my own films or being a cinematographer or editor. It doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, you know, it's all about growth.
yeah,
And I think the difference is every single thing that I've ever done, like professionally, I have put like everything into it, everything I could. Maybe not enough sometimes, but like my heart is always in it. You're never gonna
yeah,
see me like when I did concierge, when I was doing security, my heart was in it. Like I was memorizing
yeah,
shit that I probably shouldn't be memorizing. I was helping people with their groceries and stuff. Like I was just there, and I think that that can become it's like excellence is a habit,
yeah,
right? And so by putting your heart into something seemingly mundane, like being like the best bagger at a grocery store, right? You attract all the other people in life who are passionate about what they're doing too, right?
yeah,
So you're great at bagging groceries, or you could be an egomaniac and be like, oh, this is not really the art that I want to be doing, so fuck bagging groceries. But it's like now you're just wasting everyone's time. You're
yeah.
bagging groceries horribly. People's shit is falling out of their bags.
The
You know what I
thing
mean?
is I'm sorry, did you want to finish your point? I
No,
was
no,
just
go
going to
ahead.
add some. Have you ever been in a situation where you've put your heart into something, into a job, and to a point where you're so anxious that you aren't doing the right thing, and then it turns out that you're just not good enough and you've been let go? Has that ever happened to you before?
Okay, so putting my heart into something that I wasn't good enough and I was let go?
Yeah,
No, that's never happened.
yeah. I was gonna say because it's actually quite traumatizing. And I apologize to everybody listening right now because I know y'all want to hear about hoops and
That's
it's
cool.
getting a little bit deep.
This veers into life
But
all the time. That's cool.
yeah, it can be quite traumatizing.
Trauma is good.
So
Trauma is good. Not a popular take, but trauma is great. You
yeah,
know, this is interesting. So, someone accused, I think it was like I was talking about something a couple of months ago, and someone accused me of being Andrew Tate. They were like, "Oh, he sounds like someone who listens to Andrew Tate." Truth be told, I had never listened to Andrew Tate in my life at that point, and I had only heard the worst shit in the world about him, and I judged it. I judged it hard. The other day, I ended up like popping up into a video, and I was just like, okay, I'm very curious what this guy's saying. And yo, so toxic. Some of the stuff that he's talking about is so toxic about women and all that stuff. But he also makes a lot of sense about some things too. And one of the things he talked about was embrace the pain, right? And it's true. It's true, man. Like I can't even imagine the person I would be if my parents were alive. They weren't dead. I can't imagine the type of person I'd be if I didn't have to, earn every dime when I was 13. If someone just handed me money like an allowance or something, I have no idea what the type of person I would be. But I know for a fact that when I come across someone who has not gone through the struggles that I went through, I feel different than them. I can share perspectives, and I do think like there was I had a sociology professor once who talks about the difference between high cultural capital and low cultural capital. And so this sort of idea of I'm better than you because I don't know about this is gone, right? Like this idea, like, maybe 200 years ago, or I mean, I don't know, 50 years ago, or whatever, you walk and said, I don't listen to rap. I don't listen to jazz, right? I'm elevated. I only listen. That conversation does not go that way anymore. Now, not knowing about rap, not knowing about Kendrick Lamar, you're ignorant. You know what I mean? So this notion of, I think like this notion of knowing more and having a deeper experience to things, I think helps you greatly. And so if life has exposed you to the highs and lows, I think that's a huge competitive advantage relative to someone who's only seen highs or only seen lows. I think the diversity can help you connect people together that desperately need to be connected together. And I think that that's been a huge, huge advantage for me, specifically, right? I can make films about subjects that a lot of people, maybe in my position now, cannot even lean into because they've never experienced that, but I can. And similarly, I have the access to the equipment and the financing to make a film that maybe a lot of people like me never actually get to. So I'm very blessed in that sense. But I do believe that everyone can do that. And I think it starts with a commitment to excellence and not waiting for purpose and all that shit. I think the purpose should be excellence, personally.
Mm,
Yeah.
that's deep. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I appreciate that you can dive into these kind of subjects. You're not just, narrow-minded in terms of gotta be talking about Raptors and just basketball and hoops in general. And you can kind of, digress into a little bit more. I think this is what your audience appreciates about you and why you have people sticking around for your lives, because there's a chance to discuss something outside of basketball that could actually relate back to basketball in a way.
That's exactly it,
Right.
right? You look at like, this, it's so interesting how you've somehow come at the perfect time to broach this exact subject that veers into something that I desperately wanted to talk about, but had no idea how to even go into, which is Jimmy Butler and Nikola Jokic. A lot has been made of Jimmy Butler's upbringing and, how his mom kicked him out at 13 and, everything that he went through and how, when we talk about the trauma of not being able to achieve something at something that you were passionate about, imagine the trauma of being kicked out of your home at 13. This is something that I can certainly identify with, and it's something very similar happened to me. And I see that in him, in all of the ugliness and all of the controversy and all of the ups and downs of him. I've always been able to identify with him. But another person that I'm able to identify with is Nikola Jokic, because I also understand what it's like to come from a war-torn country like Serbia and to always have that sort of fear of not knowing when bombs are going to drop on your family and whatever. And neither one of these experiences, neither Nikola's childhood nor Jimmy Butler's childhood, is something that people would wish upon somebody. But how great are they in the playoffs?
Yeah.
Unrattleable, right?
Unrattled.
Unshakable.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
And
It's
so
a
that
mindset, isn't it?
exactly, I remember a friend of mine talking about sirens in Serbia, and I was I guess fortunate that I didn't live there when the bombs were dropping, the NATO
Yeah.
bombs were dropping in 97, 98. And so many wars in that country, and they would always say like the basketball gym was safe because they would never bomb the basketball gym because that's where NBA prospects are made.
Mm.
And I think about, World War II, I think about everything the Jewish people went through, I think about slavery and everything the black people went through in the United States, and I say, of course, when this is happening, this is terrible and horrible. But what it is enforcing and what it is creating is strength, resiliency, courage, and an unflinching, rise, hopefully.
Mm.
And
Mm.
and so I think it's a good thing to realize that when things are going poorly, in the moment, relax because they're going to get a lot better because you're getting through this. And it's not surprising to me that black billionaires are the biggest rising population in the United States, black millionaires and billionaires, there's a growth trend there. And of course there should be. And there is. Because there's that old quote, what was it? I remember listening to it first time from Aaron McKee in I don't know if you've heard this, but it said, hard times hard times create great men create easy times create weak men create hard times.
Wow, that's pretty good.
And and it's so
It's like a
true.
full circle.
It completely goes full circle.
Yeah.
And and so yeah, to anyone out there who's struggling with depression, anger, loss, poverty, etc., push through, man. You creating a better
Mm.
you're creating a better world by pushing through and getting through it, and future generations will prosper as a result, for sure. Yeah. James
Yeah.
Walsh venting about millennials here, saying hard to work with millennials. They don't listen, and so many are very lazy. Well, I will tell you right now, Jimmy Butler is a millennial. Nikola Jokic is a millennial. I'm a millennial, and I don't know if Nikola Jokic is a millennial. Jimmy is for sure though, and I am for
Mm.
sure as well, and I'm not lazy. So no broad brushing, old man.
I think
All
I
right,
think I'm a millennial, aren't I? I think so. Yeah.
you're
I don't know
40.
what the age gap is. Yeah. Does it
Um,
cut off at
I,
40?
I think it. I think everyone. I think it's 83 born onward. I'm pretty sure. 82,
Right.
83. I remember
I'm
there's
82.
like a yeah, okay, and then there's like a little bit of a gap between, and then I don't know what the cutoff for millennials are. I think it's 1990 or 91. So definitely Nikola Jokic
Hmm.
is not a millennial, but nevertheless, I think people have this attitude towards young people being lazy and whatever, but maybe things were just too easy for young people today, and therefore the people that we should be looking at is the people who made it so easy for them. Obviously, things are not easy for young people. I'm not saying that people today don't have issues, but I just think
Hmm.
it's not quite the same issues as war.
Yeah. It's almost like a social war, though, isn't it? More so than anything that we didn't have to deal with when we were younger. It's the
Yeah,
constant it's the constant exposure to anything and everything by just the click of a button. Like you can type in boy kills dog or something like that. You know what I'm saying? Like, and that will come up in front of you. And I think it's just that constant exposure that really kind of manipulates your mind into something a little bit more morbid, like that we didn't have those things that we were constantly in our faces when we were younger.
I think what you're
And that's
describing is
the kind of
dopamine.
social war that I'm talking about. Yeah, yeah,
Are
yeah.
you talking about like the dopamine loop that we're in? Because I mean everything is so instant, right? Like I remember,
Exactly. Yeah.
a really random example, but definitely one, when I was younger, I don't know if you play N64, right? You were in
Yeah.
that generation, you had N64, right? So I remember I used to have to wait like almost a year to get a game, right? Because we were desperately poor, and a good year was two games, right? So you got Star Fox 64 and you got Super Mario in the same year. Congratulations. My mom also had this rule where I only got to play 1 hour a week. I don't know why that was the case, but the video games were hidden all times.
Mm.
Otherwise, I would find them every now and again. So I definitely never stuck to the 1 hour a week. I would sneak, sneak play them. But I remember finishing every single game that I ever got, regardless of how good or bad it was. And those games have become iconic in my mind. Even when I look at
Mm,
reviews now, they're 6.2, 6.1. Now to complete a game is so rare for me. I have so many games. And I realized that this happened right around when games became so much more accessible to me, namely when I started making my own money and I started
mm,
buying more games. And I thought, I've been deprived of games so long, let me compensate by having more games. And so I had 18, 19 games, none of which were finished. And none of which have been
yeah,
finished. I never finished Crisis. I never finished GTA
yeah.
5. There are very few games that I've actually finished over the last, 15 to 20 years. I think Hitman, Absolution was one, GTA 4, San
Mm,
Andreas, Last of Us, Red Dead Redemption. Like I think I finished like seven or eight. Uncharted 1, 2, 3, 4 because I played it with my girlfriend. But like honestly, I haven't finished that many games. I used to finish every single game, but why is that?
yeah.
Because there's too much.
Too
There's too
many.
much everything, and you don't have to work hard for
There's a
anything. You know what I mean?
there's a
It's not that hard to afford a game. It's just not. It's just not hard to afford a game anymore. But it
yeah.
used to be like $94 for a fucking cartridge. $94 when you make five
Yeah, I
dollars an
remember that.
hour is
Yeah.
crazy, right? And that's plus
Hmm.
tax. I remember my dad bought me Shadow Man 64 for 119.99. Duke Nukem 0 Hour for 104. It's crazy to think about $104 for a video game. Back then, especially because
Mm,
money was worth so much more back then, right? It was like worth
yeah.
three times more. And you think about what that was costing, and it's like, of course you're gonna finish that game. No chance you're not
Exactly.
finishing that game.
There's
Your
no way
parents
you're getting
might beat
six
you
of
with a
them.
belt if you don't finish that game.
Yeah.
That
Now,
was
the unwritten golden rule is never buy more than one game at a time. And that's something that my brother told to me. He's
hmm,
very heavily into video games. He has been his entire life. He's actually a computer programmer right now, and he's actually working on his own. Well, he has worked on his own game, but basically that always stuck with me when he said that is never buy more than one game at a time. Get one, finish it, then move on to the next one because there's gonna be one game that's, or maybe possibly both games that you're just not gonna finish because you're just gonna be wanting to jump between the two. And so yeah, that's been my sort of rule growing up.
that's a
I
really
have a
good rule.
PlayStation 4. I don't even have a 5 yet, but
Me neither.
I'm currently working on. Well, I just finished God of War,
First one?
which I really really loved.
The
The one with
first
his
one?
son. No, 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 the
Oh,
one with his
okay.
son.
I remember playing God of
Um,
War 1 in Italy with my cousin, and he had one of those projector things so they could project onto the wall. So we played on like the entire wall. That was where we played God of War. That was my first memory of God of War. I don't know, man.
Epic.
Like it's just everything, Like when I was
Yeah,
young, I had like 5 action figures, and I cherished every one of them, and I could still remember them, and I can remember the scratches on them. It
yeah.
just you got too much, and so I think this is a really big reason why I've been leaning into minimalism over the last few years, and why
Hmm.
I've been trying to declutter my apartment so much because I just have so much. I have so many books, so many DVDs, so many this, so much that. And it's just like
Mm,
all of these things, they have energy, they create, and they're distractions ultimately, right? You
yeah.
have so much shit that collects dust and stuff. So I don't know. I want to
And you
get
kind of
down
find a
to,
reason to keep stuff, isn't it? Like there's
it's
absolutely no
just,
reason to keep it, but you just find a
as
reason to keep
George
something.
Carlin once said, you're buying boxes for your
Yeah,
stuff. Like that's just it. The house is just a box for your stuff. But to me,
yeah,
it's like I love the idea of being so minimalistic that I could pretty much pack all of my belongings into a suitcase and a backpack and just go, leave. I don't want to leave, but I'm just saying, like, I would love to know that I could literally start over tomorrow in Mexico if I wanted to. But I can't. I can't now. I have to sell my house. I have to sell this. I have to sell that. I have to I have to list a million things. I have to toss a million things. It's so cumbersome. And I don't think human beings were meant to stay in one place forever. They definitely were not, And so this becomes very unnatural. But I also think human beings were not meant to be able to have everything at the access of a fingertip. I should
exactly.
have to work to understand,
Yeah,
the biology of an armadillo. I should have to work for that a little bit. It shouldn't be all condensed for me. And now, Chat GPT and AI and everything is just making things so easy for people, and people become so
yeah.
lazy, insanely lazy.
You
And so
can.
the deep work that needs to happen, it still happens for the people who are actually successful. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like the
yeah,
deep
yeah, yeah.
work. but people aren't willing to do the deep work. My girlfriend did a silent meditation retreat, and she was a different person after that. It's like 6, 7 months ago. They don't talk for 9 days. It's
Oh wow. So
great.
they lock away their phones and stuff as well, right? I think. Is that
Phones
how
are
that
gone.
works?
Everything's
Yeah, yeah,
gone. You're preparing your own meals. It's like I think it
yeah.
was all vegetarian stuff, whatever.
Wow.
And she came back a healthier person, a different person from that. She's done that twice, and I would definitely like to do that myself too. Because again, man, like it's just like
Uh,
it's not enough for me to say that other people are doing it, so I can do it too. You know what I mean? Like it's not a. I've never been one to walk with the herd, anyways. But it just
yeah.
makes it just like if 99% of people are living life the wrong way, eating the wrong food, hoarding, and just generally imbalanced, it doesn't mean that that's someone advocating for me to do it that way. It's just more of a reminder that the people that are exceptional are not doing those things. They're not. Scotty Barnes is not eating what I eat every day. I guarantee it. It's just, you know what I mean? Like he does not work. He does not approach his morning routine the way I approach my morning routine, and it shows in the
Zion might be though.
maybe Zion might be eating worse than
Yeah.
me. I don't know. But yeah, there was, there's something, your brother told you to buy one video game at a time. My father told me when I was 5 years old, your results will not lie to you. Results are not lying to you. And I
Real,
think
yeah. They're a
yeah,
true
it
depiction
was
of reality, isn't it?
absolutely, you know what I mean? Like we constantly want to blame our results on a myriad of other situations. This person didn't do this person didn't do that, whatever. And I think it's just so subconsciously like very tempting
Mm,
to look outward,
mm.
to
And easier.
deflect the blame or whatever, and be like, oh, people don't like me because they're stupid, or people don't people don't want to be my friend because they're closed-minded or whatever. But it's just like it's all a subconscious
Hmm.
trickery that we're creating in our minds to avoid the clear issue, which is, maybe you're a bit arrogant and you need to tone it down a bit, and it's rubbing some people the wrong way. But it's like, nah, people just don't. It's just like we're logic making machines. You know what I mean? There are people out there who eat terribly every single day, but swear that they're fat because they're genetics. There are people out there who,
Mm.
don't have a job because they swear that it's because of discrimination or underemployment or the economy, but they haven't applied to jobs. So this
Toxic
accountability.
people.
Hmm?
Toxic people. I try to keep those people far, far away from me.
Well, that's exactly it, right? Because the more you think that way, the more you're going to attract people who think that way too. Because there's no way that fully functional human beings who are doing the right things are going to be attracted to talking to you if all you want to talk about is your boss hates you and whatever, whatever. It's like
Mm,
shit, like I don't like, and I have empathy. I understand that. It's tough
yeah,
to look inward and just say, like I've got issues. I got to fix. But that's the hardest thing to do. And it's interesting, how this comes back to basketball, because you think about what is the hardest thing to do in the NBA? It's create a winning culture. In my opinion, that's the hardest thing to do. And the easiest thing to do, in my opinion, is tank. It's just so easy to be bad. It's so easy. Part out assets, and then the part that somewhat goes underrated here is that the general manager who tries to opt to sell the owner on the tanking vision is basically extending his own career by several years on the prognostication or whatever, the hypothetical future of like, yeah, you got to wait for Jalen Green. Well, we know he hasn't played defense one day in his life for the last 5 years, but don't worry. Eventually it'll click together. He's still 21 years old. The hardest
trust
thing
the
to do is to
process.
bring in veterans. Exactly. Trust the process. The Sam Hinkie thing. It doesn't win. The Sixers have still never sniffed a conference finals.
No, and
Was
I
the
never want
process
to see
worth
them.
it?
I never want to see them get to the conference finals. Personally,
I
I
hope
just do
Joel
not
Embiid
like the culture.
retires as a first round exit every single year for the
Yeah,
rest of
yeah,
his life. But like I'm not a fan. But like to me, it's like, what the hell was this all for? And why did fans subconsciously anoint it as the way to go, right? Because it's lazy, and lazy ideas will always agree with lazy people. What
yeah,
Masai Ujiri and Bobby Webster have done is not lazy, in my opinion. They haven't tanked. They've tried to do things the right way. It hasn't always worked out fine, but I respect it so much more
yeah,
than I respect the team that just goes out and tries to be bad every single year and preys on lottery luck. Like they've developed actual infrastructure,
yeah.
actual, process for evaluation. They've developed these players. They've tried to create accountability. They've tried to create stability and continuity in these
Mm.
players. And I think that that's just so much harder to do. And I think that it carries forward. It's just like the same thing with, winning the lottery. It's the easiest thing to do, right? Play the scratchies every single day and pray, somebody's going to give you $20 million. What's the hardest thing to do? Save,
Or
invest, build good
invest.
habits,
Yeah. Yeah.
invest.
Yeah.
Exactly. I got into investing at 16.
Take a
I skipped that.
course, you know.
Do you invest?
I've taken a course. I mean, while I'm doing my work, I'm taking a course to progress myself rather than wait around to get a promotion. And that's what
That's good.
I'm very proud about that. Actually, I tell a lot of people and encourage that if you're not happy with where you are, you can go on the internet, you can find your passion, you can find somebody that's actually going to teach you something that you're passionate about, and move on. Yeah, just don't wait around. Like I've been stuck in a rut before where I've waited around and nothing's happened and I'm just miserable. Like, why be
Mm.
miserable? Carve your own path. That's what I encourage people to do.
Yeah, when I was I had a very like warped perception of where money came from. I thought you were just born into it when I was younger because everyone around me had more money than I did, and it was really hard subconsciously to not become that. And I remember at 16, I was trying to dip out of class, and I hated this one class. It was a history class, and they said there was an optional lecture on financial management. And I wasn't particularly interested in financial management, but I knew I was poor, so I was like, maybe I need to pay attention to this. And they was like, you get to skip class if you want to if you want to attend this assembly. I was like, hell yes. So I went, and I'm so glad I did because I think that assembly and that person on stage whose name I've completely forgotten, but whose face I will never forget, when he said the difference between rich people and poor people is what they buy. It shook me because that put the control back into my hands. He said, "Yeah, rich people and poor people both have Jordans. They both have, $200, $300 suits or shorts, whatever. But the wealthy person is putting like 0.2%, 0.1% of their money into these things that are depreciating. The vast majority of their money is going to things that appreciate, the things that you don't see, which is their property portfolio, which is their retirement portfolio, which is their stock portfolio, which is antiques that they're buying, all this shit, which is their education, which is a great investment, which is the
Artwork.
skills and all that stuff. So all of this stuff that they're putting money into, you don't see that. But what you do see is the nice clothes, the nice watch, the nice shoes. And so as a poor person, what you're going to be most tempted to do is you're going to be tempted to replicate the most outward facing part, which is the shoes. You're going to want to buy the Jordans because all the rich kids have the Jordans. So you're going to want to buy the Jordans. But you're going to spend your entire welfare check on those Jordans. And that person's going to spend nothing on those Jordans. And that is why they will remain rich and you will remain poor for the rest of your life. And in order to replicate what they have done, and it never really, like, I never really had a concept of wealth because obviously when you're that young and that poor, you don't want to be thinking that someone owns actual buildings out there. I remember talking to my cousin who they owned a home and a couple of cars. And I was like, you guys are rich. And she's like, we're not rich, we're middle class. And I was like, motherfucker, y'all, if y'all middle class, what the fuck am I? You know what I mean? Like it was a big blow to my ego. And then I met someone who was actually rich. And when I was 21 years old, I met someone who owned 127 homes in Toronto. 127 houses downtown. And it was like a development plot that they were creating. And I remember talking to them. And I also remember someone when I was 18 and I was starting out with investing and I had done a lot of like mutual funds at that time and I was moving into stocks and stuff. And I met a client of mine and he said, this is my play money. And he presented me a portfolio of $500,000. That was play money. And I was like, what's play money? He's like, if I lost it, I wouldn't notice. That's play money. You lose $500,000, you wouldn't notice, bro. How much money you got? Right? So that's when I started thinking about it. I'm not trying to replicate all of the elements of wealthy people at all. But I do enjoy certain parts of their life. I enjoy the freedom that they enjoy. I like the fact that if they want to help someone, they can help someone. I like the fact that they can do that. And I noticed yesterday, being financially secure has such a great benefit to you, which is your time comes back to you, which is so amazing. Yesterday, my friend was performing at the Super Wonder Gallery. My friend Anastasia, she's performing with this great cellist, Raphael. And I was like, yo, you got anyone to cover this event for you? Because I got a camera and I would love to do this for you. And she's like, yeah, sure. I didn't have to charge a dime. Not she could afford to pay me, but it was like, man, I just freed up this like incredible 3.5, 4 hours to be able to do this for a friend. Whereas,
Mm.
you know, if I was burnt out from working all week, I wouldn't be able to do that, you know? And my uncle, you
Yeah.
know, who was the owner of that middle class home, and he once sat down and he's like, look, there's a lot of different ways to get on this block, like which is to get a home on this block. You can lay bricks, you know, you can win a lottery, you can do whatever. You could get a million different ways. You can rob someone, kill someone, whatever, steal their money. There's a lot of different ways to get here, but there's only one way to get in this community, and that just really hit me, you know, because it was like that comfortably middle class, upper class, you know, community of people who were meeting at each other's homes and they're having these like sophisticated conversations, and there's all these parents who have like all this time with their kids. Like he would see it, like it was so different from my upbringing. I'm watching my upbringing and it's like parent working 3 jobs, no time for the kids are always alone. And then you got this neighborhood where all these parents are like hanging with their kids on the porch on the weekend. I'm like, I don't even know what this looks like. I've never seen parents and kids in the same room in my life. You know what I mean? Like my mom's always at work. I go to work. She's, you know,
Yeah.
and it was just like, that's what he was saying. He's like, you know, if you lay bricks, like it's fine. You know, it's a respectable thing. You want to be a plumber, it's fine, but it's going to break your body. It's going to break your body down over time. Over time, you can get tired. You can get tired. You're not going to have time. You're not going to have the energy to do the stuff that you actually want to do. You're not going to be able to take your kids to play tennis. You don't have the time. Your entire job is physically demanding. So that's when it really like sort of laid it out for me. Like, yeah, I could make, you know, $40 an hour doing construction. And I have done construction. I have done flooring and all that shit, but I was tired after that. So now I'm just glad that I get to do something, as you alluded to earlier, that's not physically demanding. It's creatively inspiring, and I love doing it. You know? Yeah.
Oh man. Anyway, man,
Yeah.
like really good chat.
Good chat.
I'm getting the hurry up from my missus right now because she wants to watch Along Came Polly with me.
Nice. Great movie.
So yeah,
Great
it's
movie.
hilarious.
Yeah.
Hilarious.
All right,
hilarious.
man. Enjoy.
Yeah, good
Have a
chat.
good one. Yeah, good one.
You
See
too.
ya. See ya, man.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. All right. That went off into a completely different direction, but I'm really happy it did because I don't know. I hope to the 130 of you that, you know, dwindled down to 93, 95, 100 during that chat. I hope you got something from it. I think it's he's right. I think it's conversations like this that make this a very unique basketball channel, because I gotta tell you, I listen to a lot of lives. You know, there's a lot of basketball content out there. I've never seen it so consistently veer off into non-basketball stuff that goes right back to basketball stuff. So maybe that's just our thing now. Anyway, Country Kong saying, appreciate the conversation. Yeah, thank you so much. Raptors Nation, I have a question. What is your question? CB4 or Pascal? Tie. It's a tie. It's a tie for me. If you would say DeMar or Pascal, I think I lean Pascal for sure. Just because of the defensive upgrade. But I think Chris Bosh hit a completely new level as a role player in Miami. And I think as a star, it was very comparable. Very comparable. I don't know. But like right now, like if I could have prime Chris Bosh or prime Pascal Siakam right now, I think I might lean Chris Bosh, to be honest. Yeah. It's pretty close, but I don't think there was a real debate that Chris Bosh was a top 15 player in his prime. I think there's a very, very big debate right now if Pascal Siakam's a top 15 player. So I think you need to consider that. Yeah, I lean Bosh, and you all know that I'm not really a huge fan of either one of those players. So yeah. Alrighty. Okay, guys, have a good one. Hit subscribe if you haven't already. Make sure to hit comment on which prospects you want to see first. Obviously, we're going to go through an entire depth of, I'll say 20-ish prospects from June 1st all the way to June 20th as we lead up into the draft. But let me know if there's some that you think maybe are a little bit underrated, that might be kind of going under the radar, that could move up, could fall down. Maybe there's players like Anthony Black, where I'm just like, there's no way he's going to be down to 13, but maybe you want to hear about why he'd be a great fit with the Raptors. Um, yeah, I think we're gonna have a coach before the draft for sure. There's almost a month left before the draft. I think the Raptors will probably decide on their next head coach within a week. And I think with Adrian Griffin, I think if you want to consider why this might be taking a while, it might be because David Adelman is really, really, really being considered for this job. I think that might be it. You know, because like Mike Malone, he advocated for him in his post game presser. It's obvious that he is really, he's. It makes so much sense to have someone like David Adelman or Jody Fernandez. I think those two guys make so much sense. I understand that while the Kings were still in the playoffs, there was an issue with maybe getting him out of that. I'm not sure that I'm positive that an assistant coach who has a chance to pick up a head coach is going to have the blessing of the organization and his head coach to be able to pursue that opportunity even in the midst of a playoff run. But I do think that what's at stake for the Denver Nuggets, specifically, and with the relationship that exists between David Adelman and his team and with Mike Malone, I wouldn't be surprised if they've just decided to table, maybe even ask the Raptors to chill a little bit. Now, another thing that's worth noting is the Nuggets did have an entire 10-day stretch here, almost like 9 days off. And that's going to be a lot of rust, I think. But that's also 9 days in which David Adelman might have had the time to do his second interview as well. We did hear that Jordy Fernandez did his second interview. I think it'll be between those two guys. I'd be very, very happy with either one of them. All right. GG Jackson would be interesting. Hell no. I would not be happy with that. That would be one of my most dreaded draft day outcomes for sure. All right, guys. Take care. I think you're saying interesting as in a video breakdown. I'll make one for sure, but because he's one of the considered prospects or targets in that range, but I'm not a fan. All right. Yeah, exactly. All right, guys. Take care. Bye.